think Tevez going to Juventus, what a coup that was for me. I mean,
on a head-to-head battle, Atletico Madrid can do more damage to Barcelona than the other way around.
Either he's really blind or he's fixing the match. I can't see it any other way.
I'm trying to get Sir Bob on my side here by saying City will win the Premier League.
it is an upset. You would expect Man United to go and win there.
Over $1 billion was paid in transfer fees between the clubs in Europe.
It's football. It's damn football. Like Ferguson said, football. Bloody marvellous.
Yeah, well, the celebration was, I can't believe I just scored against Mexico. At one point, Parma, I think it's only like 224 players under contract. Hey, they want to throw me out of here, fellas. You're going to get me arrested on your show.
If you're a serious talent, you're going back and you're playing for Santos. You know, you're going back to play for, like in Argentina, for River Plate or Boca Juniors, or you're going to Europe.
He looked like the Ryan Giggs of old. He was more creative than any player on the pitch. He made Mata look stupid. He made Rooney look silly.
Now, the Premier League is the most exciting league out there. I think it's probably the best marketed league without a question.
When you look at the draw for the Champions League, you kind of say, well, all the pieces kind of fell into place for everybody except City.
I am your host, Joe Usello. Sir Bob, Mike Orr. My co-host, Rob Rojas. My trusted co-host, Ben the Machine. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 80 of Low Limit Football. I am your host, Joe Usello, and fashionably late this evening, but ready to go. After what looks to be a week and a half off, we're back in the game here. We're just kicking off in the third or Group C matchup. I believe this is Cuba in this one here. We're just about to kick off on that one for the Gold Cup match. We're going to talk about some of that tonight. We were going to talk about Copa Libertadores from this week. We have another match in the Copa Lib tonight as well. Some interesting hearings today on Capitol Hill. We may touch upon that. The MLS All-Stars. We're going to talk about that as well. So we got a pretty jam-packed show for you tonight. Looks like the chat room is filling up, so we'll be taking your questions on some of our guests tonight. And looking to have a great show. So let me send it up first. I normally go to Bridgeport, but let me go to the Great White North this time first and foremost to Sir Bob, Mike Orr. Mike, what's going on, man?
Not too much, Joe. How you doing?
Good. A lengthy weekend of work. I was away at a symposium over the week and just got back in last night, back into town, so I should be done traveling for the summer, I hope, and we'll get back to a normal schedule, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, well, summer is to be expected, I guess, a little bit of switcheroo.
Yeah, it's always the way, man. It's always the way. So
holidays, kids out of school, you know how it is.
It's always a hot mess.
You're the only one who knows how it is.
That's true. So, kicking it down to Bridgeport. Mike, we're going to send it over to Roberto Rojas. Rob, man, what's going on?
Doing well, Joe. Doing well.
Good. You had yourself a little bit of an experience on Friday night, don't you think?
Absolutely. Been a great match, so to say, and a great experience, nevertheless.
Absolutely. We're going to obviously hold your thoughts on it because we're certainly going to talk about that in the MLS, or actually the Gold Cup section of it. You guys are going to, obviously drive that train tonight. So one other little bit of housekeeping before we start to talk about our guests and all our normal stuff that we open the show with. I would like to wish my daughter Samantha a very happy 12th birthday. Can't believe it's actually 12 years, but I wanted to wish my sweet pea a happy birthday. So now that we've done that, let's move it over to our trivia question that we normally kick it off with. So, Mike, if you are prepared to stump us, I will take your question, buddy.
All right, hold on one second. Okay, which player from mainland Europe? We know what I mean by that, right?
Yeah, not England.
Okay,
not the UK.
Has won the most Premier League winners' medals?
What mainland Premier League winners' medals?
Yeah, I got a few names.
Mainland European, that's the... I'm going to write down one name.
I got one name.
All right.
I think it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's not even really many more hints, and if if Liam's listening, I'm sure Liam will already have had this one correct. And obviously, Liam, don't throw it in the chat, please. Obviously, be the spoiler for all of us. But hopefully we can get this one out of the way. I do have one good guess. Just trying to think of the others, but I'm pretty happy. Actually, you know what? I've got one more that I want to write down. So, okay. So I've got two names so far. So hopefully we'll do pretty well with that. So let's take it to our next topic, which is our opening thoughts, gentlemen. And the opening thoughts this week is going to be on the MLS All-Star roster. And in our 7 o'clock hour, we pre-recorded an interview with Leander Schaerlaeckens, which we touched upon a couple of things here with the MLS All-Star roster. Mike, you're the MLS guy for the show, so I do want to throw it over to you for your initial thoughts and hold off on the Jovinko stuff because I know we're going to end up talking about that here, there, and everywhere throughout the show. So, give me your initial thoughts on the starting or on the selections for the MLS All-Star roster so far.
Well, I guess it's kind of hard to have any problem with the fans' picks because that's exactly what they are—a popularity contest. I guess the two picks that create the most controversy for me are the commissioners' picks.
Okay, and they were
But I do believe the whole All-Star fan. It's flawed to begin with, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. But for me, it's surprising. You would think that the fans would be better at picking this team. I mean, just to give you guys the idea, I'm going to rattle them off real quick. Nick Raimondo in goal, Matt Besler, Omar Gonzalez, and DeMarcus Beasley were chosen as the three defenders. Kaká, Michael Bradley, Benny Feilhaber, and Graham Zusi were chosen as the midfield. And the forwards were David Villa, Clint Dempsey, and Obafemi Martins. So,
and Graham Zusi's having a terrible season.
He certainly is. I mean, Feilhaber's not really lighting it up, but he's having a good season.
He's having a good season.
Kaká is
I
definitely.
don't have a problem with Benny Feilhaber being on the team. That's for sure.
Well, let me ask you this: you're the Toronto FC guy, and like I said, we're going to hold off on the Jovinko part of it for a minute. You're the TFC guy. Michael Bradley being placed on this squad as a starting 11, appropriate, good choice, terrible choice? What do you think?
Well, as a TFC fan, I'm going to have to say great choice. Okay, and not just because of what and not because he plays for TFC, but because what he's done playing for TFC. I think he's, arguably the best player in the United States.
Do you feel he's deserved of the position? I mean, for me, when you select an All-Star, you want to select somebody in that particular season that is playing at their best. That's my view of the All-Star selection. So, do you think he's playing as one of the best four midfielders in the league?
More so than Zusi.
Okay, I would agree with that. That's no doubt. How about the snubs of Kai Kamara and Ethan Finley?
Yeah, that's huge, especially Ethan Finley.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially Ethan Finley. We talked about him just last week, about the season that he's having. And to have
So is that who you're saying, Michael Brad? Like, even though they don't play the same place in the midfield, is that who you think should... Or you think it's Zusi that should be out and there should have been a spot for Ethan Finley?
I think I think there should. Yeah, I think Zusi maybe should have been out, and there should have been a spot for Ethan Finley.
And you're putting him in the midfield, right? Even though he does play forward sometimes. That's the position, right?
Yeah, I would do. I would pull him back and play him as almost at the top of a diamond type thing.
Right.
That would have been my choice, but and then again, how do you leave K Kamara on? I didn't go back and look, but I thought at last glance Kamara was leading the league in goals. Am I?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, but and then I guess let's look at it that way. From that standpoint, the top two goal scorers in the league are off the roster. No.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, you had to have either ripped up a referee scorebook or have never played in the MLS to make this team.
I guess that's right.
Or for that matter, lose on your debut.
Or lose on your debut, exactly. So, all right. So let's get into it though. Let's we've got a couple more minutes before we have Kristian Heneage coming on the show here. I didn't even rattle off the guest list. Tonight's guest list, we have Kristian Heneage joining us. Kristian has been with 442, The Guardian, and the BBC. He's going to join us in a matter of minutes to talk about anything and everything European football. At 7 o'clock, we have a pre-recorded interview with Leander Schaerlaeckens, which, again, we talked about, MLS. We talked about CONCACAF Gold Cup. So we discussed a few things there. At about somewhere between 7:30 and 8, we're going to have James Hart from Year Zero Soccer coming on to talk about their Just One Day initiative that we're promoting with them, or we're promoting for them. And at 8 o'clock, we're going to have Andres Cordero from BeIN Sports join us to talk about European football, all things BeIN Sport as well. So, definitely a jam-packed show tonight, and it's going to be a good time. So, Rob, I see I'm looking at the chat, but I'm not gathering what's going on there. So we'll have to sort that out. So, Rob, I want to get your thoughts. Any other additions you want to make on the on the MLS stuff before we move on?
Yeah. I think it's been said now that this is more of a popularity contest, so to say, than actual talent. Don't you guys think?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
But that's what all the MLS, all the sports all-star games are, especially when it's fan voting.
Yep. So I think what we'll do is we'll probably leave the Sebastian Giovinco talk about the MLS roster, maybe for the MLS portion of the program. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we'll do that, and if there are no other points that we want to make, I will effort our first guest. If you guys are up for that.
Yep.
All right. So let's see if we can get him in on here quickly, and I believe he's joining us from England tonight. So hopefully we're not keeping him up too late. We're just waiting to add him in now. Now I believe the All-Star match, the MLS All-Star game, is at the end of the month, correct? And I don't know, Mike, if you might have a date on the All-Star game?
The 29th.
Oh, there you go.
The 29th. Okay, so hopefully we'll see that up soon.
In Colorado, taking on Tottenham.
Oh, that's right. And I also wanted to mention that Edmund Neeson is in the chat tonight, so thanks for joining us again. But right now, joining us from England on Low Limit Football is Kristian Heneage. Kristian, this is Joe Usello. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you, Joe. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for taking the time and joining us tonight. The first question I want to throw at you is the reaction of the Raheem Sterling signing over with Manchester City. Where do you see him fitting in the lineup, and do you think City overpaid for him?
I think in terms of where I see him fitting in, it's likely at right midfield. He has the benefit of being incredibly versatile as a player, so you could, in theory, slot him anywhere across that front three of right, left, or central attacking midfield. Whether I think they paid too much, I think that depends entirely on your perception of the situation, because on the one hand, Manchester City needed more homegrown talent to make up for the fact that they'd lost Mika Richards in the off-season and also Frank Lampard. It's very difficult to find homegrown talent that can also contribute. We saw them try and move for Fabian Delph, who turned them down. I think if you can find someone like Sterling who, in theory, can contribute not just as a homegrown quota, but also in the first team potentially for 5-6 years, you have to take that opportunity. And I think on the flip side of that, Liverpool can't really scoff at 49 million for a player that really hadn't proved a significant amount yet. Had certainly shown that he had potential to be a world-class player, but I think was still a few rungs on the ladder from achieving that. So in many ways, while we've kind of had this debate over who's been robbed or who's been kind of getting the better end of the deal, I almost think it's been quite symbiotic of a deal, because both sides have got what they really needed. Liverpool needed capital to invest in new players, and I think Manchester City needed a real fantastic English player that they could integrate into that squad.
Right. Now, what does this mean for Jesus Navas? Does this mean that he's on his way out, or are they going to keep him at more or less as a role player?
Well, I heard rumblings that he was looking to possibly return to Sevilla. He did suffer from chronic homesickness in his youth to the point where he couldn't travel anywhere with Spain, but I think he has overcome that. I think he had psychological kind of sessions to deal with that. I think he's likely to stay because, again, we sometimes forget that you need depth in the Premier League, especially if you're attempting to challenge for the Premier League title. To simply say, okay, we've got a right midfielder, we're fine, is a little bit naive because there's every possibility that man picks up an injury or a suspension, and then you've got another gap to plug and you have to maybe try and move someone there. So strength and depth is certainly something I think that City will want and something they'll be striving for. It's just keeping both men happy and saying, trying to make sure that neither wants to push for a move in terms of be it Nasri or Navas.
Okay. I'm going to send you over to Mike Orr. I know both my co-hosts have multiple questions for you, but Mike is first up on the list. So, Mike, if you wouldn't mind taking it away.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, Kristian. It's Mike in Toronto. Very nice to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to speak to you too.
Thanks. I guess where I'd like to start, and I promised myself I was not going to talk about rumors anymore, only done deals. And I think this now fits under a done deal category. That is Jermaine Lens moving to Sunderland. How big of a signing do you feel this is for them, and how influential was Dick Advocat's presence as manager in this signing?
I think to answer the second question first, because it's a quicker one, is massive. I don't think Jermaine Lens comes to Sunderland if Dick Advocat isn't there. In terms of how influential and how significant he is, I think it's very big for this football club because I think he's a good age. He's only 28, so perhaps he hasn't got that resale value that you're looking for from a business perspective, but he's coming into his peak years. He gives them pace, he gives them creativity, and also he gives them goals from out wide, and I think they've really struggled from that. They've often lumbered that onto Adam Johnson, who I think has struggled with the weight of that sometimes. And equally, their strikers haven't had service either, and that's had a ripple effect in the fact that not just Josie Altidore struggle, but also Stephen Fletcher has. And I think in some ways Fletcher managed to ride under the radar a little bit with the fact that Josie was so profligate in front of goal for so long.
And I guess maybe with Adam Johnson's personal problems, it could be a big deal as it goes through the courts too, then. That the fact that he could be missing from the Sunderland lineup.
Well, I think that's certainly a situation that needs to be rectified quickly. From what I'm hearing, being a little bit closer to the situation, is that they believe he won't suffer a jail sentence. I think personally it will likely follow that as well. Equally, though, you're right in saying you have to kind of weigh up the possibilities. But with that as a side issue, this football club needed strengthening. It still needs strengthening. They've signed Sebastian Coates. They've signed Adam Matthews at right back. There's still more players needed. There's central midfield options needed. There's arguably something at centre back as well that needs bringing in there because their defence isn't there. Advocat has already kind of cut the strings on Santiago Virginie and said that he doesn't see a future for him. So this squad definitely needs some shaping without question. I think it's a big task for Advocat given that he's only there for a year.
Okay, I'm going to move over to United States football now, and I know you. Well, I guess I shouldn't say I know, but I know you've written an article on the opposition to the so-called pay-to-play fees and how it has driven some working-class Latino players away from the U.S. professional ranks. Players such as Ibarra simply fell through the cracks in the MLS system or the U.S. system, and instead of plying his trade in the MLS, he's now playing for Club Leon in Mexico. And I know the addition of MLS Tier 2 teams has helped fix this problem slightly in the areas where there are existing MLS teams. But what more do you feel needs to be done to keep some young players such as Choco Gomez, who has recently signed with Atlante, from getting overlooked by MLS teams?
I think you need more harmony between the bodies. I think that's the problem, is that there's too much separation. It's very difficult for me to understand the system in the United States because I come from a country where everything is very much linked, and the path to professional football or soccer, if you are good enough, is relatively straightforward. The difficulty I've found when trying to understand the US system is that the youth clubs aren't really linked. We're even seeing now very public and quite dirty disagreements between the youth club of DeAndre Edlin and US soccer. And a few more players, a few more youth clubs, are also searching for those fees. And I think that's an issue. I mean, I referenced in the piece you talk about the story of Bobby Wood as well, a player that was playing kind of in the back end of Hawaii. If it's not for the work of someone like George Kuntz, who's very focused on developing young talent and has the contacts to put him in good situations, who knows what happens with Bobby Wood's career? Maybe he is kind of consigned to being a very good player in Hawaii who only plays rec league or only plays, a men's league down there. And I think that is a wider issue as well, as the fact that there's not enough being done to find these players. Guys like Choco, who may be playing in these unaffiliated men's leagues in Southern California. I mean, the figures that George referenced, I think it was 60,000 undocumented players when he was looking at it back 14 years ago. That's a frightening number. I don't think anyone could comfortably tell me that there aren't at least the potential for maybe even 2, 3, however many potential professional players within that group. And I think that's something that the US Soccer, and to credit him, Jurgen Klinsmann is trying to do, is trying to get more scouts out there to watch people, to evaluate people. And in the wider context, I think you need a little bit of a culture change from Major League Soccer. We see Sebastian Giovinco, who amazingly was overlooked for the All-Star game, but has thrived in this league, and yet is, I think, 5'5", 5'6". We need to almost stop focusing on height and size as an issue. You talked about Choco there signing with Atlante. One of his teammates, Enrique Cardenas, said there's a big issue with size in Major League Soccer. He was adamant that he was overlooked because of his size, and that wouldn't surprise me because he didn't have a stellar resume behind him, and thus I think was overlooked because of it. And for me, that's something that needs to be addressed, whether you be 6'5" or 5'5". If you can play football, you can play football, and I think too often MLS coaches are looking for those athletes.
Have you seen any signs besides the MLS Tier 2 teams that this might be taking place? Or have talked to anyone who, I know you referenced something in the last 5 years about these MLS Tier 2 teams, but is there anything else that you know that might be changing, or is it status quo and that's the biggest problem?
There's, unfortunately, I think outside of Jurgen seeing more players outside of the Tier 2 teams that you talk about, it doesn't seem as if there is a lot. I think, again, to a degree, you're trying to change the culture because, as well, college is a recognised route for these players. Some of these guys don't have the grades, don't have the finances, or don't have the inclination to go to college. They don't want an education. I appreciate that in many ways that can be seen as the American dream to have that education, have that backup. Some guys either don't qualify for it or aren't interested in it, and you have to respect that. And I think it's almost quite polarizing in the sense that, for example, here, if I was to go and play at an academy, education wouldn't really be at the forefront of my mind. My club would give me some kind of education, but a formal degree of some sort would not be there. If anything, education would be my backup for once I had finished at a professional academy, I may get a scholarship at a local university to continue my studies and start something there. So it's a little bit convoluted. And I see why it's done. I see very much, I think, in the single entity sports of the NFL, the NBA, and things like that, it works because you don't really have any competition for them to vie with. But unfortunately, soccer is a bit of a free market. And unfortunately, MLS isn't the major one at the moment, despite its name. And so I think you have to maybe try and adapt your processes to fit with that model more, instead of trying to be stubborn and a little bit stuck in the mud with it.
Okay, we have an interactive chat, Kristian, and there's a question in there which I think I know the answer to, but I'm going to let you answer it. It says, who pays for the FA youth leagues? Just the clubs?
Yeah. Often, I mean, if I look at my own experiences, the players will pay themselves. But when I've been quoted the kind of fees that you guys would pay in North America, it's nowhere near what I paid when I was a kid. I was lucky enough to grow up in a kind of middle class family, and we could have realistically afforded that. But I mean, you look at maybe guys like Miguel, guys like Choco, people who are coming from these working class backgrounds, they can't afford the pay to play. It's as simple as that. It's not anything other than that. And I think you should never disadvantage someone because of their bank balance. I think maybe it's a bit idealistic, but you should be able to garner the opportunities because of your talent. And unfortunately, in the US at the moment, that is not what is happening. And I think it needs to change.
Okay, I don't think you'll find any argument amongst the people in the chat about that. And I guess switching gears just a little bit, but still kind of staying in the same category. You wrote an article recently about Freddie Adu re-signing, I guess, with Thomas Rongen and the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And at one time, Freddie was thought to be the jewel in the American soccer crown, and big things were expected of him. But I guess my question isn't so much, do you think, can Freddie regain some form to maybe work his way back into an MLS squad? I believe he's only 26. But more, what do you feel went wrong for Freddie? Is it simply the American system and its coaching, or is it also some of the stuff we were talking about in the last question?
I think the American coaching system played a part. I think it's too structured too often. I think the reason Thomas was able to extract what he did with Freddie at the U20 level was because he gave him a bit more of that freedom and he was willing to let him be himself. I think certainly there are outside factors. The analogy I used with a friend today was, imagine if you had to use the email address you had at 14 for the rest of your life. You probably would be quite embarrassed when you applied for jobs, with offspring_1988. And I think that's part of the problem, is that Freddie was forced to make some very big decisions at a very young age. And he's touched on that himself. He said he felt like a marketing tool. I think, he was a poor kid from Rockville, Maryland, being offered 7-figure deals. And I think you can't really blame a guy for taking that. Equally, I think it's also difficult on a personal level when you don't really have anyone you can retreat into as an athlete. And I think that's what it was like for Freddie. I don't know how many confidants he had who he could just kind of really rely on for advice and experience. Because again, it's not a slight on his agents in the slightest. What I mean by that is, how do you trust someone you've only really known for a few years with life-changing decisions? I'm not sure if Benfica at his age was the right move, and I say that, of course, with hindsight steeped across it, but I don't. I think, as Thomas rightly said, for some guys, Europe works, and equally, Freddie could have been that guy, but not at a club that size, who I think were expecting that much. I think you have to take the Michael Bradley approach. You have to go somewhere small and work your way up, because culturally, as an American, as sad as it is to admit, you're not granted the same respect as perhaps other nationalities, and that is unfortunately still the case, I think, today. And he needs that kind of the right situation for him, and I just feel like he never had that. And we draw the comparisons with Bradley. Michael could always talk to Bob. That's a great kind of font of knowledge and wisdom, and you see the way Michael conducts himself. There's very little subtle nuances that have Bob's influence, I think, in there. Freddie didn't really have that. It was very much trial and error for him, and unfortunately, too many of the trials ended with errors.
And just as a quick aside, do you see him ever regaining some sort of form where he could be offered an MLS contract?
I think I struggle to see him succeeding anywhere if he can't succeed with Thomas and Tampa. Just because I think there's no coach out there who has the mix of understanding of Freddie and also the willingness to work with him and work with his deficiencies as well as his strengths. So I think there's a potential he succeeds there. The problem you have is that if he leaves that kind of safety net of Thomas, he then has to find a coach who's like Thomas. And at the moment, I'm not really sure if I see that individual in Major League Soccer.
Okay, switching over quickly to the United States men's national team. I'm just wondering if you were surprised, like I was, that Jurgen Klinsmann didn't use one of his call-ups on Benny Feilhaber. I know you recently wrote an article on Benny, and I was wondering if you could shed some light on his omission. And do you feel he'll ever be called up under JK?
I don't think he will. Unfortunately, as I've learned this week, the second he wasn't included in the preliminary roster meant that he couldn't play in the Gold Cup. If you're not in the 35, you can't be called up after the group stages. In terms of why he doesn't do it, a colleague of mine asked him this week, and he said that there are guys ahead of him on the depth chart. I'm not understanding who those guys are or why they're ahead, because for me, Benny is not only the leading assist maker in Major League Soccer at present, but he's a piano player. And what I mean by that is he dictates the game. And I think if you look at the games against Haiti, if you look at the game against Panama, that team had a lot of piano carries, but it didn't have many piano players. And it's too much to ask Michael Bradley to constantly try and dictate from a deeper position. And I think that's the problem that Jurgen has had, is that he's recognised very quickly that Michael, and perhaps to a much lesser extent Mix Diskerud, are his two kind of best ball-playing central midfielders. Beckerman is good at retaining possession, but he's not very dynamic with his passing. And so when he's struggled in the final third, he's put Michael up there in the hope that, well, Michael can spark something. The truth is, Bradley is not a number 10. He's never been that. I think he needs to see the space to be able to find it. And I don't think he's nearly intricate enough to work in that final third, which is no great shame, because I think he makes a fantastic deeper lying playmaker. And equally, he gives you more on a defensive end than someone like Diskerud. And so that's, again, where you start to strengthen the case for Benny and say, you know what, give him a chance at least. And the difficulty I had when speaking to Benny was almost asking the questions that I sensed he'd asked himself late at night, in terms of what does he have to do? Because everything he'd been told when he'd been into camp, he'd done and he'd worked on. And in fairness to him, I'd seen those improvements myself, having watched him. And I do feel very sorry for him, because at the moment he sounds resigned to the fact that he will not suit up for the US men's national team again. And I think that's a crying shame, because I think he has a lot more to offer than just that goal against Mexico in the Gold Cup. Yeah,
no, I agree with you. It's mind-boggling to me that he's not even in the mix at all anymore. I read your collaboration on 442, the top 50 managers in football. It was an excellent article. I guess there's still some of it to come up, but what I've read so far is excellent. And I guess one thing that stood out for me, mostly because he is without team, is Carlo Ancelotti. Where do you see him ending up?
I think that's a very good question. It won't be the Vancouver Whitecaps, despite numerous rumour mongering. I think,
and I actually think Carl Robinson's doing just fine there anyway.
Exactly, and he won't need back surgery anytime soon. So he's gotten beat on all bases. I think someone like Ancelotti could realistically command a job anywhere because of his CV and his past experience. I think it could easily be a club that wants to win the Champions League, because to me that seems to be his strength, is collecting that trophy. I'm not as sold on him in terms of winning league titles in kind of recent seasons, but I think someone who aspires to win that Champions League, perhaps it could be quite an emotional return to Milan at some point. I wouldn't rule that out. I think the reason he turned them down was because he realised the squad wouldn't be good enough to achieve what he would want them to. But as I say, I think he'll be full of offers. That's nothing to debate.
I can't argue that with you, Fred. Do you think he'll be back in before the season starts, or would it be the winter now?
I feel as if he's likely to take the year off. That's just my gut instinct, because he has had a hectic few years, and it's been a very intense few years. And sometimes I've seen it with managers of kind of much less standing than him take that time off just to refresh, just to breathe, just to maybe even take in new ideas, sample things from around. That could explain why he's in Vancouver, partly taking in those games, is to just look at things a little bit differently, gain a new perspective, see what people in different cultures are doing, and see if any of it is kind of able to adapt into his own game.
My co-host wanted me to ask you quickly if you could see him replacing Conte.
No. The reason I put that in there is, if I just interject, I thought I saw something about that recently that suggested that there were rumblings that there was that potential. So that's why I wanted to ask that.
No, I think it's a fair question. Actually, it's quite abstract but brilliant thinking. I think it wouldn't be a terrible idea, but I struggle. I personally think Conte could be tailor-made for international football, just because of the way he drove that Juventus side at 100 miles an hour. It didn't really lend itself to longevity in terms of the Champions League and the final part of those competitions. But I think in the kind of self-contained, little way that international football is conducted, I think he could be perfect for that personally.
Sticking with your top 50 managers, at number 24 was Bob Bradley. Do you see him managing one of the championship clubs in England, or perhaps even a lower Premier League team in the future?
I think he's better than the Championship at the minute. No disrespect to that competition. I think he's ready for Premier League now. I think the way he handled the very difficult and tense situation in Egypt, the fact that politics really did merge with football, was truly amazing to watch in retrospect. And equally, the things that he's done with Starbeck, the fact that this team was expected to be right near the bottom of the pile, and yet he's been able to get them up there with Rosenborg, consistently losing his good players. These are all the kind of traits that, if I'm a Premier League chairman or owner, I'm thinking, that's the guy I need, because I think we're starting to see now this a bit more of a regular theme where clubs realise that actually you need to maybe sell some of your products to fund the next generation, and this idea of rinse and repeat could be a very good way to stay on the right side of financial fair play. And if you can get a manager who can build that togetherness, can almost lean into these difficult situations where you lose a star striker as he did, or a star midfielder to a club mid-season, that's the kind of guy that you want. And I think, in fairness to Bob, he is a very intelligent man, and he's taking a very different pace to management. And I think he's starting to see some of the results of that now, because even now we're seeing people say, maybe things were better under Bob than they are with Jurgen and such like. So I don't think that's pure revisionism. I think Bob's finally starting to get the accolades that he deserves.
Are you surprised then that he wasn't even in the mix for the Foxes job?
I was, to be honest. I thought that he could have done a great job, but then you read the statement that says they want a big name. And I think while Claudio Ranieri is not perhaps at the peak of his powers, he is a big name. And I think time will tell whether that's the best idea. Personally, full disclosure, I don't think it is. I would have gone for Bob, but then equally I've just spoken to the man and found him very interesting and very engaging, so perhaps I'm not the most objective of sources.
No, I'd agree with you. I would have taken Bob Bradley too. I want to thank you very much for taking my questions tonight, and before I give you over to Rob, I'd like to ask all our guests to follow the MLS, and I think you follow it. This final question. Being from Toronto, can the Toronto FC make the playoffs this year?
Yes, without question. I think there's too much talent there. You look at Giovinco alone. We talk about DPs. He grabbed that game by the scruff of his neck at the weekend, and if it wasn't for better defenders, it's sad that Stephen Caldwell's retired this week, because I think if he's there, you win that game quite comfortably. But I think, yes, there's enough great players to finally push that Toronto side into the playoffs.
I knew there was a reason I loved you, Kristian, and I'll give you over to Rob now. Thanks a lot for taking my questions.
My pleasure.
Hey, Kristian, it's nice to have you on the show. I guess my first question to you is regarding the situation about Manchester United first. With Iker Casillas having left Real Madrid to go to Porto just a few days ago, and with rumors speculating that a possible Argentine from Manchester United is going to PSG, what do you think is the situation between Angel Di Maria possibly going to PSG and David De Gea leaving Manchester United to go to Real Madrid?
Well, it was interesting that Van Gaal had said it was up to De Gea, because I don't think it is. I think they're very much deciding to take that risk and have him for that last year. Whether that's a good long-term strategy, I can almost see why they're doing it, because it gives them a year to truly identify who will be his replacement. And a tough replacement that will be, because he has consistently saved them points. In terms of Casillas moving to Porto, I do feel a little bit sorry for him. I feel like he should have been given a better send-off than he did. I'm not sure if Di Maria is the most pressing concern in terms of players to leave Manchester United, but I can see why they're willing to deal him, because in their eyes at least, they've got enough midfielders now, enough talent in there, that it's now time to cash in on him. I personally was a little bit concerned when they signed Di Maria in general, because it didn't seem like the kind of signing that would really work for them in terms of what they needed, and equally what Van Gaal needed. Yet they chose to make it anyway, and if they can recoup some of that fee with PSG, then more power to them, because again, just as with every club in Europe, they're now behest to financial fair play, and they have to consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sticking to PSG, it's been said, and obviously Manchester City, It's been said that Raheem Sterling is about to make more money than Ezekiel Lavezzi and Edson Cavani a week. Do you feel that he's making enough money, or should I say, should he make this amount of money, or do you feel like he should have been paid a bit less, considering that he's still not, I guess you could say, a world-class talent, but hopefully to be one in the future?
I think that depends on whether I'm writing his check or cashing it. The quote that always kind of rings in my head whenever I think about and I'm asked about this is something Alexi Lala said when I was talking to him about Lee Wen and whether he was paid enough in Major League Soccer. And he said, negotiate your value. And I completely agree with that. And it may sound like a little bit of a cop-out. The truth is, you're only as good as the money and fee you can negotiate. And I think for all the kind of the stick and the criticism Eddie Ward's faced during this transfer window, he's been able to get his client a significant pay increase and a move to a team that's closer to challenging for the Premier League. So whether he's underpaid or overpaid, you have to believe that he's paid what City believe he's worth, and what is the going rate for a young, talented English international who's only turned 20 recently. And for that, more power to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Sticking to Manchester United, it's said that Victor Valdez is set to leave the Red Devils. Who do you think would be the ideal replacement as a backup?
Well, it looks as if they're close to getting Sergio Romero, the Argentine goalkeeper. I think the difficulty you have in signing a backup goalkeeper is you almost need him to be willing to get splinters. As we saw with Valdez, that wasn't for him. Part of the reason, in fact, he's leaving, Van Gaal said, is because he refused to play for the reserves. Now, admittedly, at a club like Manchester United, you normally expect some kind of youngster to take that position, perhaps Ben Amos in recent years. But I think you need someone who can be happy in that position, and I don't think Victor Valdez was ever going to be that. It was a nice idea on paper to get two talented Spanish goalkeepers, one with a lot more experience, that they could learn from each other and challenge and push each other. But the truth is, I find that rarely works because you need continuity of goalkeeper. And realistically, I didn't see Valdez ever usurping De Gea unless something terrible went wrong. Something terrible occurred, and that simply hasn't happened. And thus now, at least they're likely to make some kind of money on him because I imagine they're not giving him away for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel that Christian Benteke is the right man to back up Rooney, or do you think you fancy Wilson better?
I think I would be trying to push home with Wilson because I think as a homegrown player, as we touched on with City, that's important. And equally, I think he does seem a very talented poacher. Of course, the idea or the theory in England is you have a problem, okay, who do we go and buy to fix this problem? I personally believe you can coach through problems, and we need to start doing that more in the Premier League because at the minute we don't. And I think in the case of Manchester United and this potential dearth of striking options, they've got Chicharito coming back, they've got James Wilson. Start with them for the season. See how they get on. See if there's enough there, perhaps to fashion something, and then look at what you can do. Because I think spending what will be $32.5 million on Christian Benteke, who, in fairness, has been dribs and drabs in England. He hasn't always been a consistent goal scorer. Had a fantastic tail into the season. I think no one had scored more since January than him. But for $32.5 million, that's a lot of money. You need to be dead sure that you're getting what you're hoping for. And I think at that price and with his form, it's just not there yet.
Sticking now to some questions about Newcastle and Sunderland. Firstly, what do you think is the situation with Ricky Alvarez? Do you think that he's going to stay at Sunderland, or will Inter eventually just take him away? And to mention Newcastle now, do you feel that Jorginho and Wijnaldum will do well at Newcastle?
I think Wijnaldum will do well, yeah. I think he's a very talented midfielder. I think he gives them energy. Seems to have a fantastic attitude, constantly smiling as he was kind of shown around the stadium, which seemed to almost take his breath away. In terms of Alvarez, I think it's a much more negative outcome for Sunderland fans. I think they're going to be lumbered with him personally. Looking kind of at the deal and their argument, I personally don't think they have one. The deal was structured in a way that if they survived the Premier League season, they committed to purchase Ricky Alvarez. Now, saying that a knee injury kind of negates it's all events because it simply doesn't. They stayed up, so they have to buy him. Unfortunately for them, he hadn't performed as they would have liked. The real victim in all this is Ricky Alvarez, because the poor guy is trapped in the middle of two clubs that really don't want him and are very public in not wanting him. And for a man who I think at times has been fueled by confidence when he's done his best football, it's got to be a huge shock to that. And in some ways, I feel sorry for whoever kind of has to try and reignite that confidence in a man who's publicly watched his parent club and his potential future club both try and publicly disown him.
Do you think Francis Joaquin is a short-term fix or a long-term solution for Arsenal?
I think we'll learn the answer to that this season. It seemed last season as if he was the long-term solution. I think they had a win percentage of 84, 85 when he was in the team at one point when they had that gargantuan run in the second half of the season. We just need to see a little bit more for him. It sounds, amazing to think this is the same player that Sir Alex Ferguson very publicly criticised during that 8-2 defeat as not being fit for the Premier League. Now we're seeing him as the potential heir to Patrick Vieira's long-standing throne. But I think we need to see it consistently strung out across a season, which is not a slight on him because, in fairness, he was sent on loan. He was sent to gain experience. I think this is a big year for him. If he can cement that place and almost start this season as he finished the last one, then without question, he's the long-term solution for us in that midfield.
Sticking now back to the Premier League in general, what do you think Newcastle and Sunderland should be aiming next season? Do you feel that they have the capability of either of them to qualify for Europe in the next few years? And do you think that with all the top clubs straightening in the Premier League, will the gap at the top drop between Chelsea and in the competitors?
I think, having watched both teams last season, they need to aim for the opposition's goal more often. In terms of their legitimate kind of aims, Europe, I think, is just one step a little bit too far for both at the minute. They need consistency. They need to be in the top 10, I think, for at least 2-3 seasons. Because at the minute, they're going to struggle to really attract that top talent with anything other than money. Because they both seem directionless. They both, funnily enough, despite being rivals, they say you share traits with your enemies. They both seem a little bit rudderless to me. Newcastle have handed out longer contracts, but I still don't see any kind of consistent brief in terms of the signings that they make. With Sunderland, it's just a concern that they're pinning their hopes on a man who's only going to be there for a season. He, made that dramatic U-turn on his retirement. I feel as if they should have gone for a longer-term option, personally, and that they really should have got someone who wanted to work with Congerton. I don't think they've necessarily got that in Advocat. They've got someone who will get them the kind of signings like Jermaine Lens, but long term it's an issue, and that feeds into kind of your last question there about will the gap get wider. I'm struggling to see it narrow anytime soon. In the same week that Manchester United can spend something in the region of 40 million on two central midfielders, there's no way a club like Newcastle or Sunderland is spending that, or in the case of Sunderland, can spend that. Because I don't think Newcastle want to spend that in truth. And that furthers the gap, and it makes it harder for teams to compete, because equally, if they do sign, hypothetically, a Schneiderlin type, it's not long before they're gone. It's not long before they're thanking the team and penning their goodbye messages. And that's an unfortunate kind of consequence of where the league is at the moment, is that players' loyalty and their continuity at clubs is disposable. And it's a real shame.
What do you think has done the best bit of business in the transfer window amongst Premier League sides?
I think at the moment, it's a good question. I think you're looking at Southampton and saying actually they've made some good moves again. The signing on Wednesday evening of Jordi Klaassen is a very good player. Amazed that he's actually gone for as little as he has, given kind of his pedigree and what is expected of him. Then at the top of the league, you're looking at someone like Manchester United, just because it seems like they've addressed a few issues. And then of the three that have come up, Watford have impressed me most. Signing the likes of Barami, who's got that kind of Premier League experience as well, alongside someone like Etienne Capoue, who I think didn't show everything he could at Tottenham. And then also making the most of those partnerships that the Pozzos have with Udinese, with Granada, and bringing in these foreign players. It's a very shrewd way to run a football club, and I think we'll see that borne out during the course of the Premier League season.
Out of the top 6 sides in the league, who has the best policy for youngsters coming through the first team?
Wow, that is a good question. The top... I mean, I assume you're talking from their academy.
Yes. Yep.
In that instance, you are maybe looking at Arsenal. Chelsea have certainly bought a good number of youngsters that they've then been able to sell on, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Thibaut Courtois, even to a lesser extent the likes of Bruma and Patrick Van Aanholt. But in terms of players that you see contribute for the club in question, it is likely to be Arsenal. Perhaps at a push in more recent times, Tottenham, if you're putting them in that top 6, just because of the likes of Bentaleb, Mason, and Kane, Townsend. But yeah, I think it's one of the North London clubs that you're looking at, just because they've been able to have those guys often be difference makers.
Is there a chance that Mitrovic of Anderlecht could possibly go to the Premier League, or has talks been stalled?
Well, this is the interesting and often frustrating thing about the transfer window, is that very little information gets out. And in the case of Mitrovic, Newcastle have agreed a fee with Anderlecht, that we know. They've offered to double his wages to just under £30,000 a week after tax, which again sounds like a lot, perhaps to, well, I don't know what you earn per annum, but for me that's a lot of money per week. But it's not what he wants, and with the fact that they haven't got European football, that's another concern. And so they've been given deadlines, the Mitrovic family. Whether they adhere to them, we'll see. What I know about Newcastle is they don't really mess around. They will move on quickly. They will move on without much concern if the player changes his mind, and they'll do it, I would imagine, before the end of this week, because the Premier League season is creeping upon us at a frightening rate.
Just 2 more questions. Do you feel that the Europa League is a hindrance or a good thing for top decent clubs?
I think it can often be a hindrance. I was lucky enough to cover Newcastle during their Europa League campaign, and consistently saw Alan Pardew reference the lack of time on the training field, the extended travel, going to places that are quite far in Europe, Eastern Europe, kind of Vanji Mashkala, Ukraine with Metalist Kharkiv. It's a very strenuous competition to be involved in, and it really does push your squad to the limits. And I think it's very rare that we see clubs actually ready themselves and be prepared for that. I think in recent years we've only really seen Fulham who have been able to maintain their league position in relation to having to deal with that competition as well. Every other club we see tends to suffer, and I think it's because they don't have that strength and depth after the 11 or the 18, and again that's why it is so impressive that these clubs do it in the Champions League. And part of the reason is they have that strength, they have that depth, and they can afford to buy quality throughout.
Okay, and just my last question. Today, the short list, the 10 nominees for the UEFA Best Player in Europe award has been announced. Gianluigi Buffon, Eden Hazard, Lionel Messi, Neymar, Paul Pogba, Andrea Pirlo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Luis Suarez, Carlos Tevez, and Arturo Vidal. Do you feel that possibly there is someone out of the... do you feel that who do you think is the right choice for third behind Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, as expected?
Wow, there's an easy way to annoy some football fans. Personally, I've enjoyed Buffon's play. I think, though, you could easily forge a case for Alexis Sanchez, though, because I think these awards, are often a case of who's made the biggest impact on the team that they play with. And from watching Arsenal this season, last season, I've struggled to see a player that's made a greater difference than Alexis, whether it be against Manchester City with his goals, in the FA Cup final against Villa. He's been at the forefront of almost everything good that football club has done in the past 12 months, and for that reason I would probably pop him just behind the two that constantly shuffle places.
Even if is so, you're not mentioning someone like Eden Hazard as well?
I think this is perhaps where it's a bit unfair on Hazard, because again is exceptionally talented, but I think he's benefited from the fact that he has a very good support structure around him. He has a very good team around him. I certainly think there's a case to be made for him. I'm certainly not saying it's ridiculous to have him in third, but personally, just from watching Arsenal, he's just always been the difference maker, and I think Hazard perhaps hasn't had that ceiling to move into, so perhaps I am being a bit harsh on him.
And just my last one. Obviously, we're going to make a bit of a prediction. I'm going to choose 3 players, and I want you to tell me, who do you think has the better chance of winning the Ballon d'Or after Messi and Ronaldo are done with their, I guess, rivalry? Neymar, Eden Hazard, or Paul Pogba?
I think you're looking at Neymar as the most likely. I think Hazard just after him, and then Pogba last. I think Paul Pogba still has some growing up to do. I think he's an exceptional talent, and he's got a lot to offer whichever club he doesn't move up to next, having already, I think, thrived at Juventus. But I think, as we see with these competitions, it is often attackers that win it, and I think it's because they excite the most, they score the most, and there's not really much you can do about that. So I think it's Neymar and then Hazard with Pogba. No shame, might add, Pogba being third.
Lastly, I just got a question from one of the guys in the chat room. We have a bunch of Chelsea fans as well, and they're wondering, who do you think is the better player, Neymar or Eden Hazard?
I can imagine the flaming torches coming to my doorstep if I don't say Hazard. Again, there is no shame to finish second to Neymar, is how I would preface my answer, chaps. But Neymar has just collected the Champions League, La Liga. He's been part of the treble. I think at the minute, when Hazard can say that, then we can say that he's perhaps better than Neymar. But at the minute, it is Neymar sitting on top.
Okay, Kristian. Thank you for taking all my questions. It's been great to have you
just
on.
Just to keep the flames at bay, Kristian, Hazard's right there, right?
Without question, yeah. There's not a highway's worth of distance between them. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thanks. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. Thank you, Kristian, for answering all my questions, and I'm going to pass it over to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Kristian, yeah, we have an interactive chat on our website, and the folks tune in, and we always ask them if they have questions for our guests. And tonight, for some reason, they do have a ton of them. So, and which we're happy for. I do want to ask you, there is one question that I do want to ask you from the chat, actually 2, before I let you go in. So I'll keep them very, very brief. The first one is your thoughts on Johan Kabai's effect on Crystal Palace and their resurrection.
I think he could have a significant one. I was just talking to a friend about this today. For the price that they've managed to get him for just over 10 million, I don't know if you can find an international who's won a league title with PSG, but also more importantly with Lille, where he was central to their success. He wasn't as kind of consistent for PSG in that starting lineup, and also has been to World Cups, has thrived in the Premier League, so you're not concerned over whether he can make that adjustment because he knows this league, he understands the nuances of things. I struggle to see a better option, and for that reason I think it is a very shrewd signing. Yes, they'll not get much on a resale value, and they're probably going to pay him a lot, but I think he's going to push them above into that next level. And equally, from a tactical standpoint, Cabaye, from watching him, often thrives when he has pace and movement around him. And in Yannick Bolasie and Wilf Zaha, I think you've got arguably 2 of the most talented, if not exciting, wingers in the Premier League. So all signs point to success. Add that to the fact that Alan Pardew loved to have Cabaye as his fulcrum at Newcastle. I think he'll put him in a similar position, perhaps with someone like Jedinak or even Joe Ledley either side, just to protect him, keep him safe, and goals will fly, I would imagine, at Crystal Palace this season.
I would imagine that as well. My last question for you, I was actually, because and you're getting numerous amounts of compliments in the chat room about your wealth of knowledge of world football. I was going to even venture into South America because it's the only continent we haven't truly covered yet, that and Australia. But I don't think we've ever mentioned Australian football here on the show. So I was going to give you a Copa Libertadores question, but I think I'm going to stick with one of the other thoughts that came up in the chat here. We'll close that one for the night. Is the selection of Claudio Ranieri as a coach at Sunderland when the rumors really had Preki going there as the head coach. So your thoughts on the selection of Ranieri, and will Preki ever get a job that big, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Preki situation was an incredibly bizarre one. In terms of, it didn't seem like a believable jump, and I mean that with no disrespect to Preki. I think he did a very good job in Major League Soccer. I also think he's done a very good job with Sacramento Republic. But when he said it was a head coaching role, that was when I was confused. I've since learned that it's likely to be as part of a takeover, that he's been promised this job. But I think equally the choice of Ranieri makes sense in terms of he has a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I think that's what the owners at Leicester City were going for. They wanted a statesman almost, and Ranieri is perhaps one of the nicest men in football. I was incredibly blessed to be in his presence as a youngster when he brought his Juventus side to Newcastle, and he is just a lovely guy. He stayed after training when all the guys had gone into shower, and he was playing football with a couple of the Newcastle players' young children, and it was beautiful to watch. And you can see why he is so admired, and why he was so admired at Chelsea as well. The concern you have with him is that Greece didn't go well, and he's coming into a squad that he hasn't really assembled. They'd already signed Okazaki, again a player he didn't really touch on, and then you see his first signing is potentially Carlton Cole. Now, the difficulty there is that I never like to slate players, because I think you've done incredibly well to make it as a professional. But Carlton Cole is not really the kind of striker I think Leicester needs to be targeting. I think they need someone who can give some kind of backup to Ulloa in terms of a genuine goal threat, and I don't see Carlton Cole bringing that. That's the issue he has. Equally, he will get Cambiasso back, it looks like, despite them not really having the best pass together. And yet you still need maybe one or two more just to push that team up a little bit, because I don't see them repeating that quite impressive run they had towards the back end of last season. Okay.
Last question, because I am being egged on. So with,
you can ask as many as you honestly ask as many as you like. I'm happy to answer them all.
We do appreciate you giving us so much time tonight. It's unusual for somebody to give us 45 minutes of their time, actually 50 minutes at this point. So we really are grateful for it. But I am going to close with that Libertadores question. We've obviously got River Plate playing Guarani, and River Plate currently holding a 2-0 lead in the first leg. And tonight we have Internacional from Brazil playing Tigres from Mexico in the other matchup. So of those four teams, if you've seen any of the Copa Libertadores, do you have a winner?
I'm going to be incredibly biased. I kind of hope it's River Plate. And I say this because I have a bit of a crush on Lucho Gonzalez from his time at Porto. I just thought he was a wonderful midfielder. And the fact that he's going back then, and it's a little bit, we're getting the old band back together. It's just nice to see that. I like when clubs kind of allow themselves this sentimentality of bringing players that they used to have back into the fold, maybe to pass on experience, maybe to pass on whatever they can. And for that reason, I would possibly have to put my chips on River Plate. That's not the most informed selection, I must confess. I haven't seen a huge amount of that competition this season, but if I'm allowed to choose, I would say River Plate.
Well, they seem to be a little... For me, they seem to be holding a little bit of destiny. They're the 16th seed going into this knockout stage. That we all saw how they advanced over Boca Juniors in that horrific scene at the Bombonera that night. So you almost feel like they've got a little bit of destiny rolling with them. Since we're on South America, I might as well give you one more question, and that's your thoughts of Carlos Tevez going back to Boca Juniors.
Well, it's quite funny, isn't it? Because there is this talk, and we've referenced the sentimentality of Lucho going back to River, of also Carlos going back to Boca Juniors. He wasn't happy the first time he was there. He kind of, wherever he's been, he's kind of kicked up a fuss and wanted to leave eventually. And he's always struck me as, whenever I've seen him interviewed, as just being quite a humble boy from Buenos Aires. This kid who wants to just be back on the streets playing football, and a little bit simplistic in that sense. I don't mean in terms of his intelligence or his mental state, but in terms of his desires and his motivations. And I think certainly football was a way for him to live comfortably. And I almost got the feeling that football was a job for him. And whether it was Corinthians or Manchester City or Juventus, it was a means to an end to pay the bills and keep the lights on and take care of his children. I'm pleased for him because he seems happy. my concern would be how long is he going to be happy there for? Because as I say, wherever the club, whether it be West Ham or Man City, he's found something to get annoyed at eventually. And that would be my concern if I was Boca. But again, was fantastic for Juventus. Gave them not just the quality, but the energy and the tempo and the self-belief lift that I think that club needed to push itself to that Champions League final.
I am going to throw you over to Rob because, of course, we do have one more question. So, Rob, go ahead and fire away, and just to prepare you, Kristian. Rob is a Guarani fan, or at least a Guarani supporter. He's actually a Cerro Porteño fan, but supporting Guarani in this particular competition. So he's a little disappointed with the River Plate selection, but we'll let him ask his last question. Rob, go ahead.
But I am going to the second leg on Wednesday night, so it definitely should be something interesting.
I wish you luck, my friend. Nothing more than that. Wish you luck.
Yeah, so thank you. Just my last question. With the retirement of Pablo Aimar, what type of career has he had? What has impressed you the most about Pablo Aimar during his long career in Europe and so forth?
Well, it's interesting. I think when you reflect on a player's career, often you almost try and take a snapshot of it. You look at someone like Ricardo Quaresma, for example, and there's that moment in time when he was at Porto for the first time, and you think, yeah, that was him at his happiest, when he was most comfortable, when he was just playing with instinct almost. And for me, for Aimar, that's his spell at Valencia. I feel that he never truly recaptured that. And, you can look at it a number of different ways. I think it's chronically unfortunate that injury did what it did to him and has ultimately kind of forced him into this retirement. But I think, as with any death almost, without wishing to sound too dramatic, celebrate what he gave, not what he missed out on. And for me, when he was at Valencia, he was an absolutely exceptional playmaker. And for that reason alone, I think that has to be celebrated, because we're starting to maybe see that peter out of the game. The likes of Riquelme retiring, the likes of Aimar retiring. We're not really seeing those players kind of come through in the same mould. They're expected to do more and be almost more well-rounded. And yet there's almost a beauty in the imperfection of players like Aimar and Riquelme, because they didn't maybe contribute on a defensive end and they weren't the perfect player.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can go back to that Riquelme comment saying that he definitely was maybe one of the biggest cult heroes of all Argentine football. Just the way that he was as a player, as a person, the way he played, etc., etc. It's just, you can't deny that this man, I think, should have had much more time in Europe.
Yeah, I think the thing is as well, though, you have to play where you're happy, and I think we sometimes forget that about players. And we almost, because for many of us, we never even get close to sampling that lifestyle. How could you not be happy in Barcelona, or how could you not be happy in Villarreal or what have you? I mean, in fairness, he did thrive at Villarreal, but they are human beings, and you're transporting them from a culture that is alien to the one they've grown up in often. And it can be difficult to adjust, and it can be difficult to feel comfortable when it's not the streets that you grew up on and it's not the people that you know. And I think you can tell a lot by a player when he's happiest, in terms of his football just goes with it. And, it's interesting. I'm lucky enough to scout for a team in Major League Soccer, and that's something I always look at, is how would a player transition to a new culture and a new lifestyle, because he has to be happy off the field as well. And in the case of the likes of Tevez and Riquelme, yes, they had immense talent, but as we often see with African players, football at a professional level is a way out of a very poor background. It's not necessarily always that kind of burning desire to make millions and all that. It's just a way out. And it's the same as we touched on with Freddie Adu a little bit kind of further back. You're giving someone millions of dollars to play professional football and do something. Even if his love is kind of arts and crafts, he's not going to ditch that and the money that comes with it when he has a family to feed, when there's lights to keep on, and when he has a family he can take care of.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have a one more comment here from the chat. Says, I love Riquelme so much, the perfect enganche, said Sheard.
I'm inclined to agree with whoever that commenter is. I think me and him would enjoy a beer together, definitely, because he's the perfect kind of enganche, and loved a nutmeg as well, which I always admire. I think anyone who's skilled enough to pull off a nutmeg deserves all our plaudits.
Agreed. I'm going to pass it over to Joe now.
And Kristian, I have run out of questions finally. So we do thank you so much for giving us so much time tonight and on a wonderful discussion around the world. We appreciate it. And
guys, it would be my absolute pleasure. Let me know when there's a spot available. I'd love to come back and talk more football.
Fantastic. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you,
guys.
Kristian.
Thank you.
And that was Kristian Heneage. Wow. Just wow. And the thing is that he probably could have sat there and chatted with us for another hour. And I honestly got to the point where I felt bad taking up so much time. Absolutely fantastic. Rob, your reaction to his interview?
Yeah, that's all I could say. Fantastic. The fact that he's so well versed and knowledgeable in all continents, for that matter, and all types of leagues is just incredible. Definitely.
Yeah,
great guest.
Yeah, Mike, how about you?
He's quickly moved up to one of my favorite guests.
Yeah,
of all time. He's really knowledgeable, speaks well, and seems to know all the answers.
No doubt about it. I mean, it was amazing. You wonder, because when somebody's so well versed in one particular region, you wonder if they have any background in any of the other regions. And obviously, he was able to step across the pond and give us some MLS and that sort of thing. And then you almost wonder, geez, has he had the time to dip into South American football and actually, evaluate it? And yeah, he did. and not only evaluate it, I mean, knew it so well. It was just amazing. It was an absolute pleasure to have him on. One other thing I want to add in right now. We're in the 54th minute in the Gold Cup first round, one of the last matches. Cuba and Guatemala currently tied at 0-0. So just wanted to pass that along. Gentlemen, we're going to jump right into our next guest, and we're kind of changing it up just slightly. But joining us right now from Year Zero Soccer and returning to us is James Hart. Jim, what's going on, man?
Hey.
How have you been?
Good.
Yeah. And how are things going over at Year Zero?
Things are going great, actually. I want to first of all thank you guys at Low Limit for being very kind in not only helping us promote the event that we're going to talk about a little bit, but putting it on your website, featuring it there. I saw that. That's fantastic. I love it. And I know, Joe, you're going to participate. The shirts were printed. They're hopefully on their way very soon. Mm-hmm. So, it's, everything's going out. I don't know if you saw any of the press that we got late last week, early this week in Charleston, West Virginia, for the soccer cages that are going up down there.
I did see
with
something.
Chris Kessel.
I did see something on the site before we came on. I was doing, I was just, kind of picking through and trying to do a little bit of homework, and I did see something about that.
Yeah, so Chris went out and really worked the system down in Charleston, and he talked one of the local schools into changing tennis courts into futsal courts. And we now have our first Year Zero project under our belt in turning tennis courts into futsal courts. And Chris is running free clinics and open play in Charleston, West Virginia under the Year Zero banner.
Okay. So that's pretty cool. No doubt about it, because that's really the focus of Year Zero Soccer is to bring soccer to the kids in inner cities and really give them a chance to play, just like you and I had once discussed, kind of like the basketball courts you see in New York City that are kind of caged in, where kids have a safe place to actually play soccer and really develop these skills.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we've got this great picture of this, really destroyed looking, bent up basketball rim laying to the side and a brand new soccer goal in its place.
Nice. And
we're going to kind of use that in some of our literature from here on. But yeah, Chris did a great job. He's one of our board members. Mm-hmm. And he is he's kind of a social organizer anyway. His day job is serving the community in Charleston, kind of working with people who are down on their luck, and even worse than that on a daily basis. And so these are the people we're trying to reach. We're not trying to reach people who can afford pay to play soccer. We're trying to reach people who are a little bit further down the socioeconomic scale. So for us, this is a big win.
Absolutely. Before, I'm not sure if any of my co-hosts have any questions for you, either Year Zero related or football related, but I'd like you to dive into Just One Day and tell us all about it.
Yeah, so, sorry, it sounds like I'm killing a stray animal in the back. I know, it's my cat. So Just One Day is coming up this week. It is the anniversary from 1930 when the first hat trick was scored in the World Cup. It was scored by an American. And we are celebrating this event by kind of having a virtual event where we're encouraging families to get out, play soccer together, go to the park, go out in their backyards, whatever, take pictures, take videos, do whatever, and publish it on Facebook or on Twitter using the hashtag Just One Day. And we're going to be offering some folks shirts and things like that for some of the best participation out there. So really what we're trying to do is spread the message of Year Zero, which is inclusion, which is the fact that you don't need anything special to play soccer or football. You just need a ball, sometimes a ball and a wall, as we say, or two people kicking a ball back and forth. You don't have to have anything special to get a game of soccer going. And that's kind of what we're trying to emphasize with people, is that the world's game, the beautiful game, is also the simplest game to go out and just pick up and play. And so I went out and got a few hundred shirts printed up for it, and so you're going to start seeing those around. And anytime we see people wearing a Year Zero shirt, we're going to be putting that up on the web and on Twitter. And so that's kind of the event coming up here this weekend. And so the actual anniversary is on July 17th,
which is this Friday.
So, and it was in the 1930 World Cup.
Okay.
So
my plan is to get out in my yard with my girls and kick my ball around, doing it on, kick a ball around, do it on video, and then sending that over to you. So, how do I do that? How do I basically take video with my iPhone of us a couple minutes outside, just, kicking a ball, passing, moving, dribbling, that sort of thing. How do we take that video and get it to you?
All you need to do is either, if you want to do it on Facebook, then you link it to us on Facebook. We have an account, Year Zero Soccer, on Facebook.
Okay.
Or you use Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @Year0Soccer on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And you can use the hashtag #JustOneDay. And either method, we're going to be checking those all day Friday, all weekend, and either method works.
Cool.
And Instagram as well. So if you want to do a short video on Instagram, we have Year Zero Soccer on Instagram as well.
Okay. Perfect. So what we'll do is we will probably rerun the article or at least do something on our website to to mention that maybe tomorrow night, maybe post something about don't forget to get out there for Year Zero for Just One Day. I do want to talk about quickly, because obviously, you and John Townsend do a podcast as well. Tell us about what's going on at Year Zero Soccer, the podcast.
Oh, it's been fantastic. We had Gary Kleben on last week, and I don't know if you guys have interviewed Gary ever or not, but if you haven't, you need to get him on your show.
We haven't yet. We haven't yet, but we definitely follow him on Twitter.
And our guest that was just on has done some work with Gary, actually.
He's fantastic.
Kristian. Yeah, Kristian that was just on has done some work with Gary. Sorry to interrupt you, Jim.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's your show. Gary was great. It was probably one of the best podcasts we've done. Gary's work with his brother Brian. I don't know if you guys know, but Brian took a team over to the MIC tournament, beat Barcelona in the under 13-14 tournament. They've had great success with their group. Gary's very outspoken. He was very outspoken on the podcast, very intelligent, and it's been one of our most popular podcasts to this date because I think just the quality of the guest. But yeah, things are going really well. You know, the website's going well. The podcasting's going very well. You know, we're not quite as regular as you guys, but we try to be. We try to do one every week, but we don't always end up doing it. But
it's the prunes, Jim. It's the prunes. Keep us regular.
But yeah. So, but other than that, yeah, things have been going fantastic. I managed to sneak a week in London in there and spent a week with our friends at These Football Times while I was in London, and you know, kind of cemented our partnership with These Football Times, with the founder of These Football Times, who also is the skills coach for Queen's Park Rangers. So he and I spent a good time there in London a couple weeks ago. So that was a fantastic trip. So looking forward to probably a trip to Iceland in the fall. So got to get my Iceland trips in and see another qualifier for the Euros 2016s or 2015s there.
Yeah,
2016s.
They've actually, if you saw the FIFA World Rankings, they moved up the food chain there a little bit, didn't they?
They did. They're 23rd, I believe, right behind France and right in front of Denmark.
No, you know, I guess if we want to get on that topic for a second, what did you see the entire FIFA rankings and what did you think of them?
I did. And, you know, I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into the FIFA rankings other than, you know, when teams like Iceland make a big move like that, I get to go, ha, we're above you or whatever, you know. Argentina being number one, I'm kind of like, I don't think so. I mean, Germany is still, in my opinion, Germany is probably the best team.
Right.
So... and having Wales at number 10, I believe.
I believe that's right.
I'm like, come on, really? Yeah. You know?
That one, even Gareth Bale's looking at that going, I don't think so.
Yeah. It's, and I know it's a rolling average of, I believe, a year, if I'm not mistaken, but,
and friendlies
yeah,
count less.
they're kind of like friendlies to me. They don't, their rankings don't mean
right.
a whole lot in my mind. I know they mean a lot when it comes to seed teams in a tournament. That's why it's not a joke. But when you look at them, it is kind of a joke.
Yeah, I agree. So Jim, I'm gonna let you go. I know we've got one interview to play, and then we're gonna end.
Joe, can I just get Jim to give us a quick update on his Colorado Rapids?
Absolutely.
Actually, they're playing better all of a sudden. Chad from Two Daft Yanks, Chad and I went to the game Saturday night, and they actually won. They scored 3 goals, which is like 3 more goals than they seem to score over about a month's period. Solignac, I believe his name is, playing on the wing, has been playing very well.
That's your new DP?
No, our new DP is Kevin Doyle from...
Oh, Solniak's not in on a DP. He's just in on a regular MLS contract?
Yep.
Okay, I thought he was a DP. How's he been doing since he came in, the big Argentinian?
He may be in on a young DP contract, that young DP thing they do.
Right. And how's he been looking? He's Argentinian, I think, right? Along with Pittineri and Ramirez?
Yeah. Yep.
So does he look good?
He looks very good. He was crossing the ball very well the last 2 games. Very well.
And we got Liam in the chat who's from Ireland. What about Doyle? How's he looking?
Not bad. First couple of games, you could tell he wasn't used to the pace of MLS. I mean, it's a very different pace than probably what he was used to. And different level of play. But I think he's starting to get settled into the way things work in MLS. And he started, he scored a goal finally, and he looks pretty good. He's got quality left. So, I mean, he's not Robbie Keane, but, he's not Tommy Smith either.
And do you see them making any sort of a push for the playoffs or just finishing up nicely?
I don't know. The West is really, there's a lot of teams in the West that have a lot of talent. I think it's going to be hard. I mean, if you were to compare the East to the West, there's a lot. I mean, the West has a lot more talent, I think, especially when you add Kansas City to the West.
Yeah, no, so it's been that way for a few years too, right?
Yeah, so I think it makes it a bit harder for them. They might sneak in. I mean, with the expanded playoffs, they might, because Portland is terrible, and but they're going to have to go on a pretty good string of wins, and they've got the Galaxy and the Sounders, I think, are their next two games coming up, so it could be tough.
Right. All right, thanks a lot, Jim.
Yeah, no problem.
So, and what I was saying was that the reason we were rushing along is because at 8 o'clock, we've got your buddy Andres Cordero coming on.
Oh, nice. Say hi for me.
I absolutely will. So, again, just want to, mention everybody to look up yearzerosoccer.com. You can pick up the podcast. You guys are also on iTunes, if I remember correctly, and definitely get out on Friday for just one day.
And thanks again for publicizing that. I really do appreciate it, guys, very much. It means a lot to us.
Always our pleasure to help you out, man. Anytime.
Thanks, Jim. You're a great friend of the show.
Yep.
All right, take care, guys. You too, Roberto, if you're on there. Is he on here tonight?
Oh, he's there. Yeah, he was taking a little nap. Rob's been on the party circuit for the last month and a half, so he gets his cat naps in every once in a while. So,
all right, guys.
All right, Jim. All right, man. Care. Have a good night.
Bye.
And that was Jim Hart, a.k.a. Victor Scamorza, talking to us about Just One Day. Great initiative that those guys over at Year Zero Soccer are doing. And again, like I said, always happy to help them out and publicize anything that they're doing. They're always doing good to spread soccer in this country to all the masses, but especially those that can't pay to play. So it's a great organization, and we always wish them the best. So, gentlemen,
and Jim's a great guy.
Yeah, Jim's a fantastic guy, no doubt about it. So, what we're gonna do, and Jim, I think might still be in the chat room. So if you guys have questions for him, go ahead and post them, and if not, I'll reach out to him and get him back into the chat room so that he can chat with you guys. So,
and you're gonna have a road report, Jim or Joe. Sorry.
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
And again, like I said, I'm gonna get outside with my kids, on Friday after work, and we're going to kick the ball around. You know, what's funny is we've done it before. Me, my wife, and my girls have both been out in our front yard, you know, doing that type of stuff from time to time. You know, funny story, when I bought this house that I currently live in, that I've lived in now for 11 years, when we were house shopping, it was literally 6 months of crazy house shopping, and we found nothing that we liked. And we finally found a house that we were okay with, that we were pretty much going to settle on. And I said, you know, if this, we were going to visit one more house. And I said, all right, if this thing doesn't pan out, we'll get the other house. And we pulled into the driveway of this house, and it was in a neighborhood that I thought I could never afford to live in. But it was a house that was in our price range. And the front yard is flat. I mean, it's almost like the kind of thing where I pictured myself drawing lines in my yard so that I could have a little football field on there. So I said I could picture myself playing soccer with my kids in the front yard, and that was one of the main reasons I bought the house. So every once in a while, time permitting, I do get a chance to get out there and do that with them. And Friday will be no different. So we'll definitely, you know, get out there, videotape it, send it up to. We'll link the video to Year Zero Soccer and the Just One Day initiative, and hopefully they do very, very well with you know, bringing awareness. So. I am going to jump into it because, like I had told Jim, our next guest is going to be up around the 8 o'clock hour, and that is Andres Cordero. But Rob and I, just before the start of the show, recorded an interview with Leander Schaerlaeckens, which is a great interview talking about CONCACAF Gold Cup and talking about MLS. So we'll play that for you now and be right back. Joining us now on Low Limit Football is Leander Schaerlaeckens. Leander, how are you tonight?
I'm well, guys. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for taking some time out and joining us tonight. I want to kick it off with a little quick MLS All-Star team discussion. I know we had talked about it earlier this evening about kind of the snubs and things like that. I want to talk about Sebastian Giovinco. Arguably, Giovinco's been one of the best footballers in MLS so far this season. I think if he's not actually leading the league, he's tied with the for the lead in goals. What are your thoughts on him being left off this MLS roster, this MLS All-Star roster?
It's a little bit strange, but then again, that's the nature of All-Star games, I suppose, because stardom is measured in this sense by a voting system that the fans get to decide. And I suppose that in their view, he's not one of the biggest stars, even though he is second in the league right now with 11 goals and fourth with 8 assists. And he just absolutely monstered New York City FC last weekend with 3 goals and an assist. I suspect he'll be in the game anyway because Pablo Mastroeni, the coach, will get to appoint a bunch of guys, and doubtless Giovinco will be one of them. But it is a little strange for a guy who's been so utterly dominant and who could, if he keeps up this kind of pace throughout the season, put together an all-time season, statistically anyway, and drag Toronto FC in the playoffs for the first time in its existence, to not be sort of in the first batch of guys called into the All-Star game.
It still amazes me because, like we've said, second in goals, leading the league or at the top of the league in assists. Also, one of the highest paid players in MLS, if I'm not mistaken. I think he came in for $7 million, if I remember the figure correctly. It just amazes me that this guy is probably at the top of every single list you can come up with for MLS, except the popularity list, I guess.
I guess so. I think that salary is about right. I'm not sure exactly either. But ask yourself this. At this stage in the season, who is your MVP? I think you have a hard case making it for anybody other than Giovinco.
Agreed. I agree 100%. So we'll have to, and like you said, I'm sure Mastroianni's gonna put him on the roster. It's just it's a little bit of a culture shock, I guess, right up front to see him removed from that list or not added to that list right off the bat. So I'm gonna send you over to Rob Rojas now. I know Rob has a few questions for you, so Rob, go ahead and take it away.
Yes, hi, Leander. It's nice to have you on the show. My first question to you is, with Mexico already being slightly lackluster in this Gold Cup, having the absence of Chicharito, do you think they could beat the United States if they possibly meet in the final?
I think so. I think Mexico can always beat the United States. I think the final from 2011, when the U.S. actually went up 2-0 really quickly, the last time we saw Freddie do something meaningful for the U.S., it's still really fresh on people's minds when Mexico came back and sort of humiliated them 4-2. I think that's always there, and I think Mexico will always get up for a big game like that. And I think if we're being truthful, the U.S. has looked lackluster as well. Everybody has kind of looked lackluster. I mean, you could say the only team really playing above what we would expect is probably Haiti. So it's been a very unpredictable Gold Cup. It's been sort of a flat Gold Cup, if we're being honest, a little bit pedestrian and totally forgettable. So I wouldn't rule anything out.
With the inclusions of DeMarcus Beasley, Joe Corona, and I believe it was Alan Gordon in the squad, how do you think that this United States squad will improve heading into the knockout stage?
Well, what those roster changes say to me, I mean, Altidore coming out for Alan Gordon because he's just not very fit, and Alan Gordon is, and DeMarcus Beasley, the veteran, will probably take the left back role at least for a while. Or at the very least challenge Fabian Johnson for it. I'm guessing Johnson moves to right back. Having a veteran like that coming in, and then Joe Corona, who's just sort of a solid player who can play in several different spots, says to me that Klinsmann really, really wants to win this tournament, even if it means that he has to right now eschew players that are going to be of use to him down the line. I mean, Altidore obviously has more of a long-term potential and upside with the national team than Alan Gordon does, and likewise Garza relative to DeMarcus Beasley. But I think that Klinsmann is making these moves exactly because he wants to win this tournament, and he thinks that bringing in two veterans and sort of a utility player in Joe Corona will give him a better chance to do so. So I think that was the thinking behind that upgrade.
Out of the three matches that the United States played, a 2-1 victory against Honduras, a 1-0 against Haiti, and a 1-1 draw against Panama, which player do you feel has been the most impressive, surprising, and I guess you could say disappointing out of those three matches?
Well, it's hard to say when you talk about Clint Dempsey that he's surprising, but he certainly has been the most impressive player, I think. He's scored the first three goals, then he set up the third. Although he didn't give directly the assist in the third game. The fourth goal in the third game. So I think after his suspension and after that incident in the U.S. Open Cup and that whole brouhaha, it was important for him to sort of come up big, and he did. And I think arguably without his performances, the U.S. might not have had such an easy time of getting out of the group, given how they played. As for disappointing, I think Altidore actually had an okay game in his first tournament, in his first outing against Honduras, even though he was out of shape coming back from an injury and not that well connected with Dempsey. His hold-up play was pretty strong, even if his touch and his speed were sort of gone. But any time with him, you wouldn't expect him to get cut before the tournament goes to the knockout stages. So he's probably one of the more disappointing players. And as for a surprising player, I've thought Fabian Johnson has looked really good, although you would expect that from him a little bit. Giassi Zardes has done pretty well, even though he's not really playing in a position that's natural to him in a wide midfielder spot. I thought Tim Ream maybe was the most surprising because he hadn't started on the national team in 4 years, and he had a really strong and solid outing against Haiti, I thought. So I'd probably go with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at Tim Ream in Fox Sports on Friday night, and he was really impressive in the back line with Omar Gonzalez, so you can't say anything about that. We have, switching gears now to European football. Obviously, now we have announced the UEFA Best Player in Europe award nominees with players like Gianluigi Buffon, Eden Hazard, Lionel Messi, Neymar, Pogba, Pirlo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Luis Suarez, Carlos Tevez, and Arturo Vidal. It is expected that possibly Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo will get the top two. But who do you think gets that third slot as to be considered the third best player in Europe, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I wouldn't be surprised if it sort of went to a guy like Pirlo, who had another really strong season. And sometimes these awards become a little bit gestures for like a lifetime of achievement, or a soccer lifetime anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of gets a nod for having won the Italian League 4 times in a row, getting Juve to the Champions League final, even though he didn't have the best game in the final. for winning the Champions League twice, I believe, with AC Milan. He seems to me to be maybe a good candidate for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me to a segue to my next question. Do you feel that Andrea Pirlo will help this New York City FC squad to possibly go into the playoffs?
It depends on what Andrea Pirlo they get. You know, this is always a little bit the question when these big names come over from Europe to sort of play out their last days in MLS. How much do they have left? How much do they want to have left? How much are they still willing to give? You know, is he here because he likes to go shopping on Fifth Avenue and is thinking of getting a house in the Hamptons? Or does he want to compete, and does he want one last big challenge in his career? I think New York City FC also has a little bit the problem that in Pirlo, Frank Lampard, and Mix Discaroute, they're going to have three attacking midfielders. So even when you throw in a guy like Ned Grabavoy, you wonder a little bit who's going to do the running and who's going to help shield the defense and where the balance is going to come from. So I think, of course, in terms of just raw ability, Pirlo could make a big difference and set up quite a lot of goals for a guy like David Villa and Lampard. But we just have to kind of wait and see which Pirlo we're going to get.
Absolutely. Definitely be interesting to see what he could provide for the New York City FC squad. Thank you, Leander. It was a pleasure to meet you on Friday night. I'm going to switch it over to Joe now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. Leander, I have one more question to before we close tonight, and it's turning the focus back to MLS. It's kind of a twofold question, and it's regarding Giovanni Dos Santos. It is pretty much, I don't believe it's become official yet, but it is at least rumored that he will be going to the LA Galaxy very, very soon, probably as soon as the end of the Gold Cup. I'd like your thoughts on, first of all, Gio coming to that team and what he adds to that side. But the second part of my question is more of a political one, because it seems like MLS does this from time to time where they kind of tweak and change the rules to allow teams like in LA Galaxy, these larger teams, to pick up a big player. We kind of saw it with Jermaine Jones and the New England Revolution last year, where they kind of tweaked some rules. Now we're making more rule adjustments to allow players like Gio Dos Santos come in. So my first part is, what does Gio add to the LA Galaxy? And two, is it fair to the smaller clubs that MLS constantly tweaks these rules to add these big players to the bigger sides?
All right, so your first question, what does he add? I think he adds a huge amount of inventiveness and creativity to a team that's already got in Giassi Zardes and Robbie Keane, two forwards that are a nightmare for defenders because they're fast and they move around a lot and they're sort of really hard to defend in their own right. And I think with Gio Dos Santos presumably playing underneath, that'll just make it absolutely horrible for any coach to have to sort of draw up a defense against. So I think in that sense he's going to make a big difference. In terms of changing the rules, of course, the last time the rules were changed for one specific player, it was David Beckham. And even though he went to the Galaxy and a lot of other teams benefited from that, only in that there would be a real uptick in interest for tickets when the Galaxy came to town, I don't think you could find any team that wouldn't agree that they benefited in the long run from having David Beckham in the league, especially considering sort of the watershed moment that proved to be with so many other big names like Thierry Henry and Rafa Marquez and Cuauhtemoc Blanco, etc., following in his wake. So I think in that regard, likewise, if in the short term they're sort of dealt a little bit of a blow competitively now that the Galaxy gets to add another great player in addition to the guys I mentioned and Steven Gerrard, who, by the way, they just signed. I think maybe that move can herald sort of a paradigm-shifting era for MLS where, like Giovinco, they're signing younger and better players, and that's going to benefit everybody in the long run because it'll make the league better.
I do agree with that perspective. We see them signing the Frank Lampards and the Steven Gerrards and the Andrea Pirlos, and these guys are all on the northern side of that 30 line. But you really, for MLS to improve, I would say, in terms of quality on the pitch, you do want to see them bring in the younger Gio Dos Santoses, the younger Sabi Giovincos, and those types of players that really add a much longer time of flavor, I guess, to the league. And I think that will make the league a better watch in the long run.
I think so.
Yeah, I agree. So, Leander, I want to thank you again for taking some time out tonight to join us. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back soon.
Sounds good. My pleasure, guys.
And that was Leander Schaerlaeckens joining us earlier this evening before we came on the air. I missed it, and I stepped away for a second. I wasn't listening, but apparently there was a comment about Andrea Pirlo. Rob, I want to throw it over to you just quickly before we run into the MLS coverage, just to clarify that.
Yeah. No, it's just that I just want your take regarding that he picked Andrea Pirlo as the third best player in Europe. I don't really agree on that. What do you guys think?
Over Eden Hazard, I don't necessarily agree with it either. I think Hazard had a better year. Having said that, obviously I'm going to be a Pirlo apologist too. So, but I think having said that, he offers a little more creativity in my opinion on the pitch. I still think Hazard is a better player overall. And if I had to start a team and my choices were Eden Hazard or Andrea Pirlo, I would start my team with Eden Hazard. That's for sure.
I'd find a way to get transfer for Sergio Aguero.
I knew you were going to say something along those lines, but
yeah, this is also interesting as well. Sergio Aguero is not even on that list. That's the top 30 in Europe.
Well, that looks this a joke. Then I'm glad I didn't look at it.
Do you mind if I mention? It shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, no, go ahead, and then Mike, it'll be your show for MLS. So
all right.
All right, with the top 10 that's already been mentioned, here are the rankings in order from 11 to 30. Robin, Neuer, Baca, Iniesta, Morata, Muller, De Bruyne, Zlatan, Gareth Bale, Gignac, Lewandowski, Rakitic, Boateng, Xavi, Jackson Martinez, Mascherano, Alexis Sanchez, Chiellini, Roberto Firmino, Nemanja Matic, Milk from Ajax, Otamendi, Ramos, Ter Stegen, Ada Turan. No Sergio Aguero.
Crazy. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I'll let Mike come out from his stroke and see what he says.
I'm speechless.
Yeah.
So he's still stroking out. I don't even know where to go with it. I'm kind of shocked that Aguero's not on there. I mean, Aguero was easily one of the top players in the EPL this year for the time that. Is there
any way to tweet them or comment to them about what they were thinking when they left that off, Rob? Whoever made that list. Is there a tweet at the top or somebody who wrote it or?
No, it was UEFA.
Oh, right.
Do you have a link, Rob, that you can put in the chat? I know Chad from Two Daft Yanks is looking for it, and Jim is as well. So also, Jim, I don't know if you saw in our Twitter chat between you and I did send you a link of the Senate hearings today. So hopefully you get a chance to see that. I only saw the first like 30-40 minutes of the Senate hearings from earlier today, and I forget his name now. I just saw it a few minutes ago, but he was the British man or Irish man at the end. He's the writer, the journalist. I can't think of his name now, but my God, the man is my hero now. He was awesome. I think it was Anderson, I think was his name. I can't remember exactly now. So, but what a phenomenal opening statement that guy made. If we didn't have the little computer trouble and I had some time, I would have actually picked up the clip and actually played it for everybody, because his opening statement, which couldn't be more than 5 minutes long, was so spot on it wasn't even funny. So, I've taken up enough time. Mike, why don't you kick it over to MLS and tell us what happened this week?
All right. Well, let's start with our game of the week, which was Toronto FC visiting the New York FC at Yankee Stadium, and it turned out to be the tale of two superstars. David Villa and Sebastian Giovinco put on a show in a record-setting 8-goal thriller between the two clubs. Giovinco scored the first hat trick in a 9-minute span. That ties him for third fastest in MLS history, and the first hat trick in Toronto FC history. Toronto went up 4-3 late in the game, but it was Patrick Mullins who played the hero for the home side, New York FC, when he scored his own tying goal late in extra time. I'll quickly go over the goal scorers then. So it was Sebastian Giovinco with 3 for Toronto, and an assist. Marky Delgado with the other goal for Toronto. Mullins with one for FC, New York FC that is. David Villa with 2. And an own goal from Damien Perquis. That accounted for the 8 goals. Toronto had 13 shots on goal, 5 on target, as opposed to 15 for New York FC with 8 on target. 17 fouls for New York FC, 18 for Toronto. There was it 4 penalties in the game? How many penalties was it, guys? Yeah, 4 penalties. I believe that was an MLS record.
Let me see.
2 missed, and 2 made.
Giovinco missed. Villa missed, and then Giovinco in the 34th converted, and Villa in the 65th converted.
So there was 3 yellow cards for Toronto and 2 yellow cards for New York City FC. I think both of you have seen all or parts of the game. Definitely the game of the week, right?
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
There were actually some comments I saw after the game considering, hey, is Sebastian Giovinco one of the best in MLS? Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Not just now, ever.
Well, it's like Kristian just said. Was it? No, the guest that you guys had just had on in that we just taped, he said that if he keeps going at this rate, he is going to statistically have the best season in MLS history.
Yeah.
Giovinco, that is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, he's on a tear, and again, we go back to the whole snubbing from the MLS All-Star team. How do you snub the guy that is probably playing the best football of anyone in the league, and you not replace him, but you choose instead 2 guys that haven't even put the jersey on yet.
Yeah,
it's
and then you can't even blame that one on the fans' choice.
Right, exactly.
The one other thing I'd say about Giovinco, I'm not sure if either of you noticed it. After Mullins scored his 4th goal, which tied the game up after Delgado had just put Toronto ahead 2 minutes before, he had his hands on his hip and he was looking over at the Toronto bench, and Greg Vanney like shaking his head with look on his face like, what the fuck more can I do?
Right.
And I'm not sure if either of you seen that or not. And I did. I'm just wondering if that was just quick frustration, or Joe, do you think that's something like that? Maybe he's finding this league too easy, or the fact that he's playing against people who just aren't on the same playing field as him. Is that a problem for TFC and the MLS in a year or two?
Yeah, because
with him looking to get out.
Exactly, he's going to look for a bigger challenge, maybe a way to keep himself on that on that Italian national team radar. So he's. But
you don't think that he knew that already coming over, and maybe he had to know that playing in the MLS was going to perhaps affect his Italian national team hopes, but he seems to have resigned himself to the fact that was okay when he came to Toronto.
Yeah, I don't think he expected it to be this easy. By the way, gentlemen, breaking news. Cuba has advanced in the CONCACAF Gold Cup. They will be facing the United States in the next round.
Wow.
There you go. With 1-0 victory over Guatemala.
Fix.
CONCACAF?
Yeah, you're right. There's no chance of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll quickly go over the rest of the MLS scores. It was started on Friday night. The Houston Dynamo defeated the San Jose Earthquakes 2-0. Goals by Giles Barnes and Ricardo Clark for Houston. The New York Red Bulls easily handled, I guess that's kind of surprising, the falling New England Revolution 4-1. Sean Wright-Phillips with 2 goals. Lloyd Sam and Rodney Wallace with the other one for New York Red Bulls, and Andy Dorman for the New England Revolution. Surprising scoreline, guys? 4-1?
Quite.
Yeah.
New England really seems to have fallen off after their traditional slow start. Then they seem to usually get it going, but this year, after getting it going, they seem to have fallen back again, and are actually the 6th place team in the playoffs right now. But believe it or not, Philadelphia with a chance to catch them. with a game in hand, if Philadelphia won that game, they would actually overtake New England for the 6th spot at this point in the season. Speaking of Philadelphia, they handled the Portland Timber 3-0. Nagiara with 2, and I think it's Andrew Wenger with 1 goal for Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Orlando 0, FC Dallas 2. Goals from Diaz and David Teixeira for FC Dallas. The Montreal Impact defeated the Columbus Crew 3-0. 2 goals from Dominic Adaro and 1 from Donadel for Montreal. The Chicago Fire beat the Seattle Sounders 1-0. Johnson for Chicago in that one. Our friend Jim Hart's Colorado Rapids beat the Real Salt Lake 3-1. Drew Moore, Watts, and Ramirez for Colorado. Sebastian Jaime replying for Real Salt Lake 3-1. That was for Colorado. And the final game of the week was Sunday evening. It was the Vancouver Whitecaps taking on the informed Sporting Kansas City, and Sporting Kansas City eked that one out 1-0 on a goal from defender Kevin Ellis, I think it is. And that's the MLS this week, guys. I'll quickly go over the standings. This week I will do the standings instead of points per game. In the East, it's DC United in first on 35 points, followed by the New York Red Bulls on 26 points. You can see there's a huge gap of 9 points there. Toronto is in third on 24 points, tied with Orlando and Columbus Crew and the New England Revolution, but Toronto has games in hand on all of those teams. Just outside of the playoffs in the East right now is Philadelphia on 20 points in 7th. The Montreal Impact are in 8th with 16 points. And New York City FC, that was games played. It's Philadelphia 22, Montreal 21, New York City FC 21 points, and Chicago Fire at the bottom of the table in the East with 18 points. In the West, it's still the Seattle Sounders on top, tied now with the Vancouver Whitecaps on 32 points, same amount of games played, so actually I guess that is a dead tie. FC Dallas are also in first place with 32 points and have played 1 less game. Portland Timbers and LA Galaxy tied for 4th on 31 points and the final playoff spot, but a team that is on the rise in the last few weeks, Sporting Kansas City on 30 points. Just outside the playoffs in the West is San Jose on 25 points. Houston on 24 in 8th. Real Salt Lake on 9th at 23 points. And bringing up the bottom of the table, Colorado on 21 points. The one thing that's kind of noticeable here in the West, I know there's still a long way to go, is that there doesn't really look like there's going to be a battle for that 6th playoff spot at this point in time between Sporting Kansas City and any of the other teams, considering there's already a 5-point difference between those spots, and Sporting Kansas City has games in hand on all the teams below them. Is that surprising to you guys that they add another playoff team and it doesn't really look like we're going to have a race in the West?
Yeah, just looking at these standings quickly, not only does that surprise me as we're going to have it's just kind of separated itself out, but just the fact that RSL, you would expect a little bit more out of Real Salt Lake than 23 points after 20 matches. That doesn't sound like the Real Salt Lake you're normally used to. They've given
Is that a lot to do with Christ, you think?
I think it does. Also I'm wondering the workload on Nick Raimondo. Maybe that's also because they've given up the most goals in the West.
And I think Jeff Antonella is the backup, and he has maybe. I know he started 1 game, but it might be 2, but that's it. And that means, he's played 18 games plus Gold Cup duty, and he's got to be, 38?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's getting up there.
I am going to cut you off because joining us now on Low Limit Football is none other than Andres Cordero from BeIN Sport. Dre, it's Joe. How are you?
Hey, Joe. Nice to speak with you again. I'm great, man. I actually just watched Cuba qualify, advance out of their Gold Cup, so I'm sitting out on the balcony here in Miami smoking a Cuban cigar, breathing the humidity of South Florida.
Well, we won't tell the authorities, but if you have an extra one, I'll be down soon and I'll join you. Fantastic showing for them, that's for sure. Unfortunately, they're gonna face a tough challenge in the next round in the United States, I would say. You give them any chance at all to advance past the United States? Everyone's picked the U.S. to win this tournament, but
yeah, very, very little chance to absolutely none. But if you've been following the politics, it is a timely matchup in the Gold Cup. So a tournament that has been somewhat underwhelming so far at least gets a really good storyline for the next round.
I agree, and I agree with the underwhelming comment. Obviously Mexico's got Trinidad and Tobago coming up next in the tournament here. I believe that they do have to play Trinidad and Tobago next, and they're going to be trying to win this group, but no one's putting any support towards them. They're really not looking all that impressive as the United States is as well. What do you attribute it to with these two sides just not playing their best football?
Between Mexico and TNT, you mean?
Between Mexico and the United States, neither side has really been the team you expected in this tournament.
No, that's true. But we actually just got away from the Copa America, where we were hearing a lot of the same thing, that the favorites weren't shining, weren't dominating. And I think at some point you give credit to the way that other teams play against them, the fact that it is difficult to win at this level, and that over the years we've seen sort of a coming together of the top teams and the bottom teams, and not to the extent of the U.S. and Canada or the U.S. and Cuba, but certainly teams like TNT can put up a good performance. Teams like Guatemala, although they weren't very good against Cuba, I think they make the good teams look bad, and I don't think anyone's arguing that either the U.S. or Mexico are in a golden generation. So burden of proof is really on both managers.
True. I do want to throw it over to Europe quickly, and I want to just ask your opinion on what happened this week or over the past week with Iker Casillas being sent to Porto, leaving his beloved Real Madrid. Is it something you expected, and what does Real Madrid do to replace him?
It's unreal, isn't it? I mean, obviously they want to replace him with De Gea. There's a question as to who's going to play against Porto in that preseason friendly coming up. Obviously, with Iker Casillas headed to Portugal, it makes sense that he would be in goal. But Keylor Navas is a guy who's been patiently waiting, who has been one of the top goalkeepers in La Liga for the last few years, and he's been taking the back seat, obviously, to Iker Casillas. So I mean, nothing is surprising regarding Casillas now, because this has been going for so long. It's incredible that he does leave, so many, 3 seasons after the issue with Jose Mourinho first sprung up. So obviously it's not, the most difficult thing to do in football seems to be to leave Real Madrid through the front door. It's what happened to Raúl, it happened to Fernando Hierro, it's now happening to Iker Casillas. The biggest Madrid idols have a difficult time on their way up.
And I want to ask you one more question about Italy before I send you over to Rob. I know he has some questions. News broke tonight that it looks like Juventus is going to accept a bid for Arturo Vidal. What kind of hole does that leave in the midfield for Juventus? And does this also signify the fact that maybe Paul Pogba is going to stay longer than 1 more year?
Well, it's hard to look beyond this summer, much less next summer. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much on Pogba's situation. I know that's there's plenty being written about that if you look online. Obviously, it's a major blow for Juve, because Arturo Vidal is not just one of the best players at Juve. He's one of the best players in Serie A. I mean, he's elite level for that league. And you look at the other side of that. If it does end up being Bayern Munich, you give Pep Guardiola that midfielder, that weapon. I mean, a player with that kind of caliber who can play virtually any position. I mean, it's almost a dream player for Guardiola, a guy like Arturo Vidal. Mm-hmm. For Juve, I don't know how they replace all of, because they do have Marquinhos, obviously, who's starting caliber, who is a player who could have started for any club in Serie A, but that's one player. And if you've got both Pirlo and now Arturo Vidal gone as well, maybe Pogba sticks around a little bit longer. But even if he's there, I don't think that a midfield of those two guys with Sami Khedira is necessarily better than what they had a year ago.
I agree 100%. And one more thing before I throw you over to Rob, Jim Hart from Year Zero Soccer wanted me to say hello to you, so I wanted to pass that along.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so Rob, go ahead and take it away with Dre.
Hey, Dre, it's nice to speak to you again. First, I just want to mention, how was the experience in Chile for the entire Copa America?
Yeah, it's wonderful, really. Good to speak with you again. But, 36 consecutive days of nonstop work. It's something somewhat out of my elements. I'm not a reporter. It's not something I typically do. But when there is a major tournament, a World Cup, a Copa America that we're covering, they do have they ask me if I'd like to cover it or not. So it is a nice experience for me and an opportunity really to step out of my comfort zone and do something a little bit different, to be pitch side most of the games, to have the kind of access that I don't normally enjoy covering European football from the United States. We're so far away at times that it is nice to, to be right next to the pitch when everything's happening in a tournament like this, which again may be underwhelming from the point of the aesthetics, but certainly from a competition perspective, the Copa America was absolutely brilliant. You consider some of the smaller teams that not much were expected of, teams like Paraguay, teams like Jamaica, for example, made it really difficult on opponents.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to a segue to my next question. Being Paraguayan American, we obviously, I guess we could say, had a great tournament regardless of getting runners-up and exceeding all expectations, really, beating Brazil in the penalty shootout in quarterfinals, and then despite the dreadful loss in the semifinals to Argentina and then in the third place against Peru. What are your takeaways of this Paraguayan campaign in Chile?
Well, I actually had a chance to see a lot of Paraguay, plus I was in La Serena covering Argentina for basically all of the group stage, so I got a chance to see Paraguay play against Uruguay. I got a chance to see them play against Argentina when they overcame that 2-0 deficit in the second half, playing arguably the best football they played in that Copa America. I thought they caught a lot of teams by surprise, but I don't think they were surprised. We talked to a lot of the players early on. Victor Cáceres, for example, who said that Paraguay were being disrespected. And obviously, a little bit of that is facetious because the players themselves, Justo Villar back in December when I spoke with him during the draw, basically said that we had to be patient, that this is a team in transition, that they're not at the same place that they were in 2011. And they all seemed very negative, very downtrodden about their chances. And obviously, their tunes changed as the results changed during the Copa America, and they're a team that grew into the tournament, got better as the competition progressed, and then obviously had some real physical limitations when it came to the semifinals and players were just breaking down against Argentina.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ramon Diaz has done really well with the squad that he took apart a few months ago, and I especially like Darius Gonzalez. Amidst all the controversy that happened to him and his uncle's death, but I think he's been a spectacular player. Is there a possibility that possibly heading into the upcoming World Cup qualifiers that you could see them head to Russia in 3 years?
Well, it's the absolutely best case scenario for them going into the qualifiers, because for some teams, for the big teams like Brazil, Argentina, even Colombia, who I thought flopped spectacularly, the Copa America was about winning silverware. But for a team like Paraguay, it was about getting into the best possible sort of frame of mind and sort of building a cohesive unit ahead of the qualifiers. And so mission accomplished in that regard. I think you saw it from the body language of the players, from the way that they reacted to that defeat against Argentina, which was heavily one-sided. They seemed content. They liked their performances. They felt like their job was well done. And indeed it was, because the job was to see where they stood ahead of the qualifiers, and now they're a team that, it is the most difficult qualifying process in the world, even though virtually half the teams out of CONMEBOL make it to the World Cup. It is an incredibly difficult process, and you have to travel to Bolivia. You have to play in the altitude of Quito as well. It's difficult to go to Barranquilla, Colombia. And I think Paraguay are a team now that in Asunción or anywhere else people won't take lightly because of their performance in this Copa America.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and especially all us Paraguayans are definitely looking for hopefully a good revival and go back to the glory days of the late 90s and throughout the 2000s. Just sticking over back to a different country now who has flopped in the Copa America, to Brazil. With Neymar's sending off in the second match against Colombia, obviously it's not very worthy that someone like that, of his immaturity, should be deemed the captain's armband. Do you feel that he is worthy enough to have the captain's armband? And if he's not, who do you think should deserve it? Should it be Thiago Silva or maybe Miranda, like he did in the last two games for Brazil?
Yeah, it's a difficult position for any Brazilian manager, because whether you name him captain or not, Neymar will have certain clout within that dressing room, and he will be a leader whether he's wearing the armband or not wearing the armband. So you have to evaluate that from inside of the locker room. It's really difficult to argue who should be the captain of what team without being inside of the locker room, without being training every day, to see how players react to whoever is chosen as captain. And I think Neymar, because of his talent, because of his star power, because of the clout that he commands inside of that dressing room, probably is as deserving a captain as anybody else. But there have been little flashes at times of either his peers or people in the media, maybe from the outside, saying that something has to change within Neymar in terms of not his performance on the pitch, obviously, but his reaction to certain things, his maturity. We even heard from Xavi on his way out heading to Qatar that there are little things about the personality of Neymar that maybe have to change if he's going to take that step that we all expect to be an eventual Ballon d'Or winner. I think some of the stuff is a little bit misplaced. Like, for example, the big bust up with Athletic to the Bilbao earlier this season, where they took exception to some of his tricks, and we've seen that repeatedly in La Liga, where teams get offended by some of the trickery from Neymar. But I would never want to take, or no manager should want to take that aspect of Neymar's game away from him. And part of it is his demeanor more so than the tricks themselves, because I don't think it's very different from, say, Ronaldinho. But Ronaldinho would nutmeg you and do a sombrerito, but then have a big grin on his face as you chop him down. Neymar's demeanor is a little bit different. He reacts different to fouls. He does have a sense, or at least appears to have a sense of entitlement on the pitch that maybe rubs people the wrong way. So you take the good with the bad, and he's a very young player. And I think we hold him to a standard that we don't with similar age players, like, for example, Eden Hazard.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he's still young, he's only 23 years old, and he comes from that, I guess, street kid from Brazil that grew up in that environment. So it all has to take time nowadays. Now sticking to Argentina, who are the runners-up in the Copa America. Obviously, they lost in the final to Chile by penalties. Firstly, do you feel that this is probably the last chance for Lionel Messi, Sergio Aguero, Carlos Tevez, and Javier Mascherano's last chance to win a big continental tournament for their country? And do you feel that maybe some players like Gonzalo Higuain or any others up front should be replaced like players with Mauro Icardi, Luciano Vieto, Paulo Dybala, and so forth?
Well, to your first question, it really depends on whether the 2016 Centennial Copa America actually goes through, and whether people place the kind of importance on that sort of special edition 100-year anniversary version of the Copa America that they do on the regular Copa America. Keep in mind, it's a tournament with a sort of irregular format with irregular years. I mean, it's changed throughout the year, so it depends on how that's viewed next year, and if it does happen, because it does, obviously, you'll have something like a very similar base for Argentina, which is still, I thought, the most talented team of this Copa America, and if they were to reset and restart all over again, would still be the favorites. In fact, if you just replay the final, it'd probably still be favored over Chile. So is it the last chance? No, probably not. If you're looking beyond next summer, then maybe it becomes more difficult for someone like Javier Mascherano. Obviously, Messi a bit younger, still has plenty of football ahead of him. And the way that we've seen Messi adapt his games, it's funny, there's so many comparisons between Messi and Cristiano, and it's interesting to watch as both players mature, how they seem to be moving away from each other in terms of position, where Cristiano is becoming more of a number 9, getting closer to the opposing goal. Messi seems to be drifting away from it. Maybe it's sort of the natural devolution or decline of, say, players like Xavi and Iniesta, but Messi has dropped further back to fill that role, while Cristiano's moved further forward. And I think that role for Messi, where he can sit deeper, he can be almost a regista at times, and obviously still has a ton of explosive. We're just looking at the future for Lionel Messi. I think he can prolong his best years in a way that maybe some players who are just purely goal scorers possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have a few more questions. This one's from chat by Luca, who actually said that you have a quality name in Andres Cordero. Sorry, elite name. And
it's actually, if we were talking about Juventus earlier, Andrea Agnelli is the Italian version of my name. Go figure.
I'm sure Joe will be impressed on that. He just wants to know your thoughts on William as a player.
On William the Brazilian?
Yes.
That was an unintentional rhyme. He's a nice, explosive, fun player to watch. I don't cover the Premier League, so I watch that more as a fan than I do as an analyst or as a commentator. I thought he had a bit of creativity to him. I thought he's the kind of player who can show you things during a match, but doesn't really put it together for 90 minutes, for me anyway, in the limited scope that I've watched him. So I don't want to be unfair to William, but again, having not watched him as closely as some other players, he seems like a guy whose best football is still ahead of him.
Okay, I just want to go back to the Copa America just for a few minutes. What is your opinion on Peru's overall performance, reaching third place for a second consecutive Copa America?
Well, when you talk about some of the teams that maybe weren't expected to do a lot and really gave a really good account of themselves, I think Peru's at the top of that list, along with Paraguay, because not the results, but the quality of play that Peru had at times was some of the best that we saw in Copa America. And up until that sending off against Chile, they were virtually en route to eliminating the host in the Clásico del Pacífico. I thought this was a tournament replete with Argentine managers, and Gareca did as good a job as any of the other technically six Argentines that were managing. I think Gareca, who was in the mold of a Marcelo Bielsa, he's one of those so-called Bielcistas, wanted to propose an attack-minded brand of football, and that's what we saw from Paraguay at times. And obviously a lot had to do with the player Paulo Guerrero, who is a guy who you kind of tend to forget when you see him play for Peru, and you remember how incredibly talented he is, and then you don't watch him again, you forget how good he is, and he surprises you each and every time that you see him play. And maybe that's sort of a lack of consistency, perhaps, at the club level, but I thought he was sensational, and Peru were as fun to watch as any team in the Copa America, which is a surprising sentence in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think Colombia performed poorly on expectations? Because essentially this is the same squad with some exceptions. Obviously Mario Yepes wasn't on that squad, but it's essentially the same World Cup squad that made it to the quarterfinals with the inclusion of Radamel Falcao. What do you think went wrong for Colombia?
Yeah, of the four favorites, there were four legitimate contenders at this Copa America. Ahead of the tournament, I'd actually picked Colombia as the one most likely to underperform, to underwhelm. And I think if you look back at Brazil 2014, that Colombia team, virtually the same team, minus Falcao, the weight of expectation was taken off of that team when Falcao, who was in sensational form going into that tournament, before the injury at least, all of the expectation kind of went off, and you could tell that the players were having fun when they played. The way that they celebrated their goals, they transmitted this sort of infectious joy that caught everybody by storm, and everyone got swept up in it. And James Rodriguez had his own breakout party, because James had a decent season with Monaco, but it was nothing whether you're talking about his time at Monaco or Porto or River. He had never been the goal scorer that we saw during that World Cup. Then you fast forward a year ahead, all of that expectations comes back and now doubled, because not only do you have Falcao on that team as well, but it's not the same version of Falcao, because he hadn't lived up to that same pre-World Cup form at any moment between the World Cup and the Copa America. And you're not going to catch anybody by surprise, because now teams are very well aware of what Colombia are capable of. And I think the combination of those two things made for a disappointing Colombia, and one that never looked to be having the kind of fun that they did when they weren't expected to do much a year earlier.
Amidst all the controversy that has been said about the hosts, in the end, the Chile got their maiden title for the first time in 99 years. Are they the deserved winners?
Yeah, I think no matter who came away as the winners, you'd call them the deserved winners. And Chile in particular, I mean, this is a nation that has been waiting basically its entire football existence for a major trophy, and has had some good players in the past, but this was sort of a now or never with an exclamation point for Chile, because of the moment that players like Gary Medel, like Arturo Vidal, Alexis Sanchez, I mean, it's a golden generation, all right around the right age, right about their primes, with a good manager at the helm, a manager who's done some important things inside of Chile, at least with the Chile. So are they deserved winners? Yes, and I think you listen to Tata Martino, you listen to some of the other managers as they gave their press conferences throughout the Copa America, and they all seem to be wowed by the way that Chile played, the bravery with which Chile attack, and some say kamikaze, right, because they are so poor going back, and defensive transition can struggle at times. But they played as attacking a brand of football as anyone in the Copa America, at times as effective a brand of attacking football as anybody in Copa America, and I think they deserve to win. And you take into account that they had the perfect game plan in the final against Argentina, which was to hack early. I mean, Gary Medel had a borderline orange card when he kicked Messi across the midsection. There was a hard tackle against Angel Di Maria about 3 minutes into the game. The mentality was, don't let them get comfortable. And I think they set out to do that, accomplished it, and were worthy winners. And it's good for the nation of Chile, obviously, because while they became somewhat unlikable through the course of the campaign, with Arturo Vidal's strong driving situation, with the Gonzalo Jara incident, which is now obviously infamous and this topic of many memes, this is a team that made history in a stadium that once held political prisoners, where people were killed, and it changed the story of that stadium. It changed the soccer history of that country. I think it was an important moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's rightly deserved, and they can have the chance to possibly win it again next year and hope for a good performance in the Confederation Cup in Russia. Do you think that Falcao could recover his form under Mourinho?
Yeah, I think he can. With Falcao early on, one of the big knocks was that he was injury prone, and the frequency of the injuries. This is obviously talking about a young Falcao, was a real cause for concern when he was about to make his move to Europe. And then he had a long stretch that was seemingly injury free, and at Atletico is where he really reached his apex. And he goes to Monaco, doesn't quite perform. The injuries start popping up, and so can he reach the level? I think with consistent football, yes. The question is, can he stay fit? Can he produce that consistent football? I don't think we'll see a better version of Falcao than we've ever seen, but can we see something close to his Atletico Madrid form? Maybe. I think Jose Mourinho is a very good man manager who gets the most out of his players. And similar story to Diego Costa. Diego Costa can stay fit. He can be an elite goal scorer. If he is continuously bothered by injuries, there's, when you're at a club like Chelsea, there are players who can step up, take your place, and it's very difficult to win the fans back and to win your spot back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to stick now to my question about certain managers. Jorge Sampaoli of Chile, Marcelo Bielsa of Marseille, and Diego Simeone of Atletico Madrid. Firstly, do you think that Diego Simeone would be the perfect replacement for Tata Martino if he does leave the Argentine national team? Do you think that Sampaoli would be the perfect replacement for Simeone at Atletico Madrid or even in some other major European league? And what do you think Marcelo Bielsa has to do with this Marseille team that has a mass exodus of players like Dimitri Payet, Imbula, Gignac, and so forth?
Yeah, some of the best talent in Ligue 1 has actually been plucked over the summer after it was a very fun campaign in French football. To answer your first question, Simeone potentially taking over at Argentina, I think he's still probably a bit too early in his managerial career to accept an international job like that where you're not working in the day-to-day of football quite as much as you are at the club level. I think he still has some important things to do at the club level, and will more than likely at some point, obviously this is not inside information, it's just a belief that he will at some point manage Argentina. I don't think it will be so soon as to replace Gerardo Martino, but there are very, very few teams on the planet that Diego Simeone cannot improve because of the way that he is with players, because of the way they believe in him. And I'm actually very excited to see what he'll do with Atletico this season with the inclusion of Luciano Vieto, who he obviously made debut in Argentina with Racing. So that should be an interesting thing there to see the Villarreal striker at a place where strikers have really excelled, because Atletico just keep churning really, really good goal scorers for the last, over a decade now. Simeone will probably stay put for a while, for at least for a bit, and even beyond his Atletico days, I think he still has one or two clubs in him before taking over a national team.
Okay, that's understandable. Thank you. I just have one more question. With the announcement of the Best Players in Europe awards, with the inclusion of Buffon, Hazard, Messi, Neymar, Pogba, Pirlo, Ronaldo, Suarez, Tevez, and Vidal, it's obvious that possibly Messi and Ronaldo will get the top two. But in your opinion, and this had some debate between a lot of fans on Twitter and even on this chat room saying that either Neymar or Hazard gets that third best player spot. But in your opinion, who do you think is the third best player in Europe?
Not to put me on the spot or anything. Third best player, it's so difficult to say who the best player is, who the second best player is, if you're just talking about a particular year, right? And so obviously it does become a bit of a popularity contest, and that's the reason that we just sort of pencil in Messi and Cristiano, and the order changes depending on their performances. Who is the best beyond that is hard to tell, and I think Neymar has obviously improved dramatically in his second season at Barcelona, though it's hard to argue that he's clear-cut better than Luis Suarez, who he shared a team with. With Hazard, I think he's a player who a lot of people are high on, especially young football fans really love to watch Eden Hazard because he is exciting, but he's another player who, for me, hasn't really been as convincing yet. Obviously, he won the PFA award. He has a huge future ahead of him, and I risk incredible pitchforks and flames from social media anytime you say anything that isn't a huge praise to Eden Hazard. But I think he still has to convince in terms of putting together complete performances in big games. And obviously, he's very, very young, so if we held him to the same standard that we do Neymar, I think he would fall short of what Neymar has accomplished. And obviously, he's played at some big clubs and has a lot of talent in the national team. As well as Hazard. So I don't know who you would put there. I think Carlos Tevez deserves a mention. I think Gigi Buffon deserves a mention. And I think Luis Suarez, considering how much time he missed at the beginning of the season, and ironically how he was left off of the shortlist for the Ballon d'Or after having a sensational campaign with Liverpool, obviously because of the incidents at the World Cup. he gets lift off of that short list, but now he's on the top 10 in Europe a year later, so I think he deserves some consideration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see Carlos Tevez making the top 10 in the Ballon d'Or, in my opinion. Okay, Andre, thank you for answering my questions. I do want to mention, I saw your tweet regarding Raheem Sterling's fee being the same cost as the Indian Mongolian space probe currently operating Mars.
Yeah.
And I will actually be making the trip to South America this week. I'll be going to Paraguay for the second leg of the Copa Libertadores between Guarani and River Plate. So,
yeah, I've been on. That's amazing, but I've been on such an astronomy kick all year long. Really, when you consider that we've landed on a comet, we've sent a spaceship 3 billion miles away over 10 years. I mean, my mind is blown, and it's really difficult to focus on transfer rumors in football when you've got events that could be changing humanity as we know it. So, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Joe now.
You know, Dre, one thing I was telling Rob here in the chat is that he was kind of inside my head and taking all my questions because he asked all my Colombia and Falcao questions. And I was like, you're going to leave me with nothing. I guess we could turn this into a discussion on the flyby of Pluto and what you thought of it. We could always go there.
Oh, man, I'd love to.
You know, but I am gonna stick with some football. I do want to go back to the Copa America, and I do want to talk about the Brazilian team a little bit, and more specifically Neymar. You know, it looked like to me, and I had mentioned this, I believe, a week ago on our show, that when Neymar was suspended and they were, I guess for lack of a better term, forced to bring Robinho onto the pitch, that the team just played a little more fluidly, which leads you to believe that Neymar, whether he might not be the right fit for the Brazilian side, which I know sounds crazy, but he also might not be the best leader for the side. So my question to you is, should they take the captaincy back away from Neymar and give it back to Thiago Silva?
Well, it doesn't just sound crazy. It is crazy.
That's what I
thought. Because that Brazil are better off without Neymar. And this does tend to come up. For example, you remember all the talk about Messi dependencia, right, at Barcelona, whether Barca were too dependent on Lionel Messi. And that's obviously slightly different from this conversation, but we do tend to hold the star player accountable for the performance of the entire team. Mm-hmm. And, you know, were there moments when Brazil looked like a more cohesive unit post-Neymar? Yeah, there were moments, particularly in the second half against Mexico, I believe, and the final match of the group stage. But those were moments, you know, and I equated at times to when a team in the course of the game goes down a player, has a player red-carded, and all of a sudden there's only 10. And subconsciously, something clicks in every player on that pitch that, okay, we've got to be more attentive. We've got to. It's almost a psychological, subconscious reaction to the fact that you know you're now at a disadvantage. Similarly to Colombia when they lost Falcao, you know that we've got to give even more than when we had our best player with us. And I think that sometimes accounts for short-term improvements. But over the long term, you know, the course of even a short tournament like a Copa America, like a World Cup, where you're talking about 5, 6, 7 games, Neymar has to be there for Brazil to achieve important things because he is a difference maker. And when they play teams that sit in a little block, that try to limit the space close to their own goal, Neymar can create goals out of nothing in the way that Robinho maybe once did, never quite reached the height that he wanted, but that no other player for Brazil does, Willian included.
One more question about Brazil is on Dunga. You know, many people will point the finger at Dunga, saying that his teams just aren't creative enough to play that Brazilian style of Jogo Bonito. Do they sack Dunga anytime soon, or do you think he survives at least to the next the Centennial Copa America?
Dunga is relatively well liked in Brazil, and I remember being at the World Cup summer 2014 when Dunga was not the manager, and the way that even Brazilian journalists reacted to him. So I think a lot of the Brazilian managers who haven't exactly excelled in recent years are well liked, and that's maybe part of the problem is that Brazil continue these retreads. They keep bringing managers back instead of appointing managers with some new ideas, and it's insane to think that a nation like Brazil that has so many managers, so many players, hasn't had any really fresh renewal when it comes to hiring their managers. Basically, we just keep seeing the same list of names in a carousel. Can he survive Brazil's Copa America? I think it's quite likely, considering they were without Neymar once again, as they were at the World Cup because of that injury against Colombia. So I think that gives them the ready-made excuse to say, well, let's give it another go. Obviously, Brazil were not a joy to watch. Jogo Bonito was absolutely absent. And And Dunga does have a tendency to bore with his style of play. I mean, he's a former defender. His teams kind of take on that characteristic. But I have very little faith in the Brazilian Confederation or Brazilian Federation hiring or appointing a new, fresh face with new ideas. And so I think it's very possible that Dunga remains for the Centenario.
Okay. I'm going to turn the focus back to Chile on a player that I thought had a fantastic tournament, and I was kind of surprised wasn't named to the best 11 for the tournament, and that was Jorge Valdivia. He's currently at Palmeiras. Do you see him? I mean, I know he's 31 years old, so it would be tough for him to move off to a different club. Do you possibly see any chance of him maybe going to Europe for a year or two, or maybe even coming to the MLS? Because I thought he was fantastic and wonderfully creative in the midfield for Chile.
I believe he's actually headed back to Middle East, and you're right, though. He did have a fantastic first game for Chile. We were talking about Twitter a moment ago. I tweeted out that we're all here for Valdivia. We just don't know it yet. And he is such a fun player to watch. That part of that obviously goes to credit that you have to give to Charles Aranguis and Marcelo Diaz, Arturo Vidal, the midfielders who do sacrifice a little bit of their going forward, who do strictly defend, with the exception of Vidal, obviously, but Diaz and Aranguis, who do stay back and allow Valdivia to have that freedom, to not have much in the way of defensive responsibilities. But he is such a creative, such an inventive footballer, a guy who does create chances out of nothing. And when you give him that freedom, when you have such hard-working midfielders around him, especially someone like Arturo Vidal, who seems to be playing for three players, then you can afford a Valdivia who gives you very little defensively. But, they call him El Mago, and for good reason. He does create magic going forward. And he might have been the most fun player to watch at the Copa America. Agreed.
I'm getting a question in the chat on a player that I'm actually not familiar with, and I'm hoping you might be, is somebody who had signed for Chelsea by the name of Kennedy, is a young Brazilian. Can you tell me anything about him? Have you ever heard of him? I personally have not. So
I've got absolutely no idea who Kennedy to Chelsea is.
Yeah, no. I don't worry about it because I didn't either, and they were asking me like, ask about Kennedy, and I'm like, I don't know who Kennedy is. So, but you know how Brazil is. They churn out young players all the time. I'm sure if we don't know about him, if he's anything magical, we'll know about him very, very soon. So, last fun questions that I want to ask you are: one, is Pluto a planet or a moon?
Pluto is actually a dwarf planet. And so we had to recategorize Pluto. The international astronomical community basically reclassified Pluto as a dwarf planet because we found so many Pluto-like objects in the Kuiper Belt. And so the choice became, and I know maybe you're a little surprised to give you a serious answer to this, but the choice became either we allow Pluto to stay in, but then we have hundreds upon hundreds of planets in our solar system, or we reclassify Pluto to be something like the rest of the things like it that we know in the Kuiper Belt, and it's now a dwarf planet.
It drives me crazy. When I was a kid, it was Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and that was it, and you knew it. And so it kind of drives me crazy that all of a sudden we're debating Pluto. Just leave him alone. It's an exemption.
But that's just it right there. See, leave him alone, right? If Pluto didn't have a cute name and was attached to a Disney character dog, no one would care. But because it has that sort of lovable connection, people actually protested the reclassification of Pluto, which was insane.
We had to give my dog that middle name because my little daughter said so. So my dog's name is Maximus Pluto Ucello. So
my dog has a Greek name as well, but it's Socrates. We call him Sox. Basically, the Brazilian player Socrates.
Oh, sure.
Who has very long legs and moves very elegantly. That's basically my dog, so we named him Socrates.
And the last question that I've got for you is: what are your thoughts on Neil deGrasse Tyson?
He is, as described, a rock star astrophysicist. Basically, people who have zero interest in astronomy still know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is because of his appearances on The Daily Show, because of the Cosmos Show, obviously, which was absolutely brilliant. He is if you would, sort of disciple of Carl Sagan, who was one of my heroes growing up. And so anyone who promotes science and who makes people more aware of what's going on is good by me. And so I'm a huge fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson.
The way I see Neil deGrasse Tyson is when he walks into any room, he's the smartest guy in the room. There's no other way around it. So, Dre, thank you again for taking some time out and joining us tonight. I hope you enjoy the Cuban cigar on the deck there, and hopefully we'll have you back again very, very soon.
Cheers, guys. Thanks again for the invite.
Thanks again, man. Have a good night. And that was Andres Cordero from BeIN Sport. We're multifaceted here at Low Limit Football. We can talk about South American football and we can talk about Pluto as a planet. So, we can roll either way. So, Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see someone that has vast knowledge of astronomy, but also could talk about, who should be the coach at, I guess anything really in South America.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, what about you?
I thought it was fun. He's a great guest.
Yeah, he's always wonderful to talk to, and I'm so glad when we get him on. And we just enjoy asking him questions for hours on end. Especially in season when things are, hot and heavy, especially in Spain. You get Dre on, and you can go for hours with him. So he's fantastic. So, hopefully we'll have him back again very soon, especially towards the start of the season. We'll really get him to ramp things up. So, Rob, I'm going to throw it back over to you if you wouldn't mind rapidly preparing some quick little Copa Libertadores recap for us from last night and what's going on tonight.
Well, the big match today, obviously, is going to be Internacional de Porto Alegre against Tigres of Mexico. So, the first match in Brazil. Obviously, yesterday there was a result. Guarani lost 2-0 to River Plate at home, courtesy of goals from Rodrigo Mora, and I believe it was. Now I'm trying to remember here, but if no one saw that goal of Rodrigo Mora, I suggest you go find it, and it's an absolutely beautiful goal. But as I rapidly check who scored that first goal, it was Gabriel Mercado. Yep, 60 minutes, 73rd minute. So now they're definitely going to have to, Guarani definitely have to go overturn a 2-0 deficit at home now. So it's going to be very hard, but it's possible.
Yeah, I agree.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say I agree. When I saw the final scoreline there of 2-0, I thought to myself, wow, it's going to be one heck of a hill to climb for Guarani to get back in.
Yeah, absolutely. And International of Porto Alegre against Tigres of Mexico with the debut of Andre Pierre Gignac for Tigres.
Is he going to play tonight?
Yes, he is.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to see if we can find that game somewhere.
It should be on Fox Deportes.
Oh,
it shouldn't.
You never know. Also, while we're talking about Fox, Mexico and Trinidad have kicked off. They're in the 5th minute, 0-0.
Right.
So, now the last thing I guess we want to bring up, I'm sorry. Anything else you want to add on the Libertadores?
No. I just hope for another good match next week when I'll be there live.
Okay. All right. So let's turn our focus over to the Gold Cup now. As we had mentioned earlier this evening, Cuba with a 1-0 victory over Guatemala, qualifying them for the next stage of the tournament. We currently have Mexico and Trinidad and Tobago fighting for really what would amount to the championship here. Obviously Mexico is currently in second place. The Trinis leading the way at the moment. So just to give you some of the recaps of the scores from the group stages here, and I'm just trying to track down where we left off. We had Panama 1-1 draw with Haiti. USA 2-1 over Honduras. This is going back to last Tuesday because actually we haven't had a show since then. So we're going to give you basically all the scores of the tournament. Costa Rica 2-2 draw with Jamaica. El Salvador 0-0 with Canada. Trinidad 3-1 over Guatemala. Mexico 6-0 over Cuba. Honduras 1-1 draw with Panama. USA 1-0 over Haiti. Jamaica 1-0 over Canada. Costa Rica 1-1 with El Salvador. Trinidad and Tobago 2-0 over Cuba. Guatemala drawing Mexico 0-0. Haiti 1-0 over Honduras. Panama drawing the USA 1-1. That was on Monday night. On Tuesday, Jamaica 1-0 over El Salvador. Canada and Costa Rica played to a 0-0 draw. And earlier this evening, Cuba beating Guatemala 1-0. And like we had mentioned earlier, Mexico and Trinidad and Tobago are still in the first half of a 0-0 draw. So, giving you the group standings, the final group standings for the Gold Cup. United States on 7 points in Group A, taking the top title. Haiti in second on 4 points. Panama on 3 points. In third place, Honduras last and eliminated on 1 point. Jamaica taking Group B with 7 points. Costa Rica in second place on 3 points. El Salvador and Canada 2 points each, both eliminated. Previously mentioned Panama also qualifying for the knockout stages. And in the last group, we have Trinidad and Tobago currently leading on 6 points. Mexico on 4 points, and Cuba qualifying earlier this evening on 3 points to play the United States. Guatemala eliminated with just 1 point in the tournament. So we don't have all the knockout matches. I don't believe we have any of the knockout matches set up other than the one that I had heard, which was the U.S. playing Cuba on Saturday. I haven't seen anything other than that at the moment come up. So as soon as we get those matches, we will definitely highlight them, and we will certainly talk about the knockout stages of the Gold Cup when we return on Monday. Anything else that we want to add, gentlemen? We've got our transfer window stuff. We talked about Carlos Tevez going back to Boca. And Mike, I know you're not going to bring up any transfer rumors. So Mike, I'm going to throw it over to you. Just any transfer moves that have been completed that you think warrant mentioning. Or have I lost you? Rob, are you there?
I'm here, Joe. Just give me a sec. My headphone's really starting to mess up on me. Or you guys forgot to remind me to get a new one.
Oh, that's right. So.
All right. So I guess we got Raheem Sterling, obviously going to Man City. We got Carl Jenkinson from, I think it was Arsenal or was it Chelsea to West Ham?
Arsenal to West Ham.
Yep.
Yeah. We got Schneiderlin going to Manchester United. Bastian Schweinsteiger to Manchester United. That's a fairly big one.
Matteo Darmian to United as well.
Asmir Begovic to Chelsea from Stoke, is it?
I believe that's right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and you've got Glenn Johnson moving to Stoke. Any other big ones? Shea Given moving to Stoke. Van Ginkel from Chelsea to Stoke. Cabaye, I think we talked about, to Crystal Palace. Toby Aderwald to Tottenham. Capuey to the to the promoted Watford. Falcao to Chelsea. You guys got any? We got Eder to Swansea. Nathaniel Klein to Liverpool. Czech to Arsenal. We're getting back into. You guys got any newer ones that are complete or transfers? Because I know you guys like to talk about the rumors.
Was Jorginho Wijnaldum to Swansea?
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they're saying Van Ginkel is a loan. It's a loan deal.
Okay.
All right. So as far as obviously updating of the transfer comings and goings, Rob, what kind of rumors are we looking at right now?
A lot.
Told you guys were going to carry me this week. Let's throw the Pogba to Man United, Pogba to PSG and Pogba to Barca and Pogba to Real Madrid, because if we don't put it out there, we actually lose our broadcasting license. So, all right. So now that we got that out of the way, what else we got?
United, Ramos to United.
Yeah, my understanding is that Ramos is going to be made going to get an offer of, I think, the captaincy and some type of extension at Real Madrid. So I think that one's.
He already has the captaincy.
Well, I think that he shared it with Casillas, I think. So yeah. So that's going to be his full time. I know the De Gea thing to Madrid is virtually dead at this point.
Di Maria to PSG.
That one is a live one. That one apparently they are really, really close. So we'll have to see. What do you think of him moving to PSG, and how does that affect guys like? I don't think Verratti's going anywhere, but I saw a rumor earlier this morning that Thiago Motta might be going back to Inter. So
it definitely brings some competition for him and Lavezzi on the left.
Yes, absolutely. Shaqiri to Schalke possibly, and Mohamed Salah.
That's a done deal.
That is a done deal. Shaqiri to Schalke.
I think that's a done deal.
And Mohamed Salah going to Fiorentina. I thought I'd heard, and that when Jim put that one up, I thought Salah was looking to get out of Fiorentina.
Sorry, Jorginho Wijnaldum to Newcastle. I meant to say that.
Yeah.
And Pedro to Chelsea.
Okay, I hadn't heard that one yet.
That's another rumor.
All right.
Benteke to United.
That's a rumor still. Do you think Benteke to United happens?
No, because I don't think he would want to be the backup to Wayne Rooney.
Right, exactly. I think as a young guy, he's looking to get himself, on the pitch full time. If he wants to move to a bigger club, if he wants to move away from Villa, where does he go? Does he go to? I mean, I don't think he goes to someplace like Arsenal, although I think he would probably start there.
Otamendi to United.
Otamendi to United. Okay, I think that one is close, though. I think Isco to Chelsea's a rumor, according to Liam.
Muller to United. Thomas Muller.
Thomas Muller to United. I mean, everybody's rumored to United. That's why I say I've said that before. You and I are rumored to United. I'm holding out for a better contract. I don't think they're offering me enough in wages. So, but
if there's I don't think there's anything else to mention.
Yeah.
I signed at United this morning and immediately put in a transfer request.
I know it. So, so I mean, right now, I think until we get a little bit closer to the start of the season, because I think the transfer window ends the first, September 1st?
September 1st.
Yeah, so I think until we get to that point, there's going to be a boatload of rumors, and you really have to kind of just pay attention to the signings, like Mike is saying. I think maybe 2 weeks to go, we start looking at the rumors a little more once some of these rumors have panned out into signings or not. So, I think the interesting one on the docket right now is Vidal to Bayern Munich, which looks to possibly be a done deal. Jim Hart's putting Giovanni Dos Santos to the LA Galaxy. That is a done deal. And I think they're waiting to actually make it happen until after the Gold Cup. So we'll see. And again, we talked about that with Leander. It just feels like MLS just changes the rules whenever they want to make it easy for their big clubs to pick up the big names. So
one thing we didn't mention was the retirement of our friend Stephen Codwell from Toronto FC yesterday.
Well, I think let's dual mention that because we have confirmation. Stephen Caldwell, who was the first active footballer we ever had on this show, announced his retirement yesterday, and that is the bad news. The good news is that he will be joining us next week on this show to discuss life as a footballer. I mean, now that we've moved beyond it. I've got some great questions for him, so I can't wait to have him back on again and chat with him. So, obviously congratulations on a great career. We'll get to tell him that personally next week and kind of spilling the beans a little bit. He's going to be one of our guests next week. So,
looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So, and it's always an honor to get a chance to talk to him. So, I'll tell you what, gentlemen, we're moving fast and furious here with the week ahead. Let's look at the week ahead, Mike. I know you have a surprise for us for the match that we're going to predict for the week ahead. What did you find?
Well, I'm going to leave it up to you guys because there's two matches that I think could be potential this week. We have a battle of second and fourth in the East and a battle of second and fourth in the West.
Right.
So we've got Orlando taking on the New York Red Bulls, or we have Portland and Vancouver.
Wow. Those are two good games. I would, obviously being a Red Bull guy and getting to watch Kaká, I would take the New York Orlando. It's got a little more star power in that match than the other matchup. But Vancouver.
Okay, let's decide it this way. Which game are you two more likely to watch given your schedules? And just
when are the matches being played?
Well, obviously the Portland-Vancouver game's going to be a late game.
Yeah, on Saturday.
I wish I would have kept that open.
They're both late games.
They're both late games. I don't have access to MLS.com or MLS.
Well, the Orlando-New York Red Bull game can't be that late.
I'll get that one locally.
7 o'clock. 7 o'clock.
Yeah, what time's the Portland game? Given the time change,
10:30.
Huh?
10:30.
How much?
10:30.
Yeah, so that's the late game. And that's on Sunday, Rob?
Yeah. No, that's Saturday, right?
Okay, so which game do you guys want to choose then? Orlando, New York, seeing as you're Red Bulls fans?
Yeah, let's do Orlando, New York.
And that's just likely the game that you're more likely to watch, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's do that one. And I've got a prediction. Oh, sorry, Rob?
I said, unfortunately, I can't see both of them because I'll be at the airport.
Ah, yes. Will you be back next show?
Yeah, he'll just be broadcasting live from. Will you be in Argentina? I guess is the better question.
Paraguay.
Well, all right, so he'll be broadcasting live from Paraguay. You'll have to kidnap Hotita and have him next.
Was Argentina just a slip of tongue there, or are you going to Argentina too?
No, I'm not going to Argentina.
Oh, I thought you were talking about possibly going to Buenos Aires.
Okay, so I'm going to predict the Orlando New York Red Bulls score as 1-1, guys.
1-1. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair result in that match.
Rob?
Yeah, 1-1.
I actually like that.
Yeah, that's a good result.
Yeah, that is a good result. So I don't think I can argue with it. Vancouver 2-0 in the other one.
Unfortunately, I've got, I hope you're right, but I've got Portland winning 1-0 at home.
Okay. All right. How about Copa Lib? We've got tonight's matchup between Internacional and Tigres. Rob, you wanna throw a number on that one?
I think Inter wins 2-0. Even if Gignac does play, I think. Okay, 2-1. 2-1, Gignac scores for Tigres.
I'm going to go 1-1.
1-1.
Yeah, I think so. Mike, you care to put your 2 cents?
I'll go 1-0 International. How do you pronounce that?
International.
Internacional.
Oh, so okay. Yeah, I'll go with them. 1-0.
Not to be confused with the Italian International.
Right.
That's right. And I guess in the Gold Cup, because we don't have any matchups truly set up other than the U.S.-Cuba game, so I guess we'll predict that one. 3-0? 3-0 U.S.? I'm going to go 3-0.
Considering this United States side won by 1 goal or just draw, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised.
I think they get their heads. I think they get their heads out of their you-know-whats and they actually take it to them. I'm going to go 3-0.
2-1.
2-1. Mike?
4-0.
4-0. Wow, even bigger. So, all right. So that's our week ahead, and as we get closer, we'll start talking about European matches too. So let's.
Which we are only, I believe,
like
3 weekends away from the start of the Barclays Premier League.
There you go. See, so it'll be soon enough. So Mike, all we've got left is our trivia answer and then the preview for next week.
All right, I will read the question again. And the question is, which player from mainland Europe has won the most Premier League winners' medals?
I wrote down 2 names, and I'm not giving them to you as answers yet. First of all, did Liam get it right?
He didn't text me anything.
Ah, okay. The 2 names that I wrote down are Thierry Henry, and I wrote down Eric Cantona. And I'm not. You know what?
No.
I've got a third one. What about Nani? He did all those years at Manchester United.
Joe, I missed your first one. Who was that? Sorry.
Thierry Henry is the first one I wrote down.
And the second one was
Eric Cantona.
All right.
But I'm almost thinking I want to go with Nani instead because he's been at United for so long. I'm going to go with Nani.
Rob?
I just want to mention Cantona has never won a Champions League. Henry's only won 1 Champions League, and Nani has won 1 as well.
Okay.
I'm going to go with an Italian, and I have 2 picks. Paolo Maldini.
No.
All right.
Or Costa Rica.
Remember, this is Premier League winners' medals. Has nothing to do with Champions League.
Premier League winners' medals. That's why I was like, did I miss the question?
Oh, Premier League.
Premier League winners' medals, not Champions League. So.
Oh, that's
the fact that Eric Cantona has only one Champions League doesn't affect this question.
And Eric Cantona has no Champions League. Oof.
Yeah, see? But Cantona...
You know what? I'm going to go with Paul Scholes.
Nope, he's an Englishman. He wasn't
got to be off the island.
Off the island.
Off the island. See, this is a hard one, man.
Oh, God.
I know, that's why
So it's a mainland player.
Mainland Europe.
That won a Champions League for a Premier League side.
Premier League
doesn't
medals.
Have anything to do with the Champions League. Just the Premier League.
Premier League medals.
He could have won 0 Champions League and still be the answer to this question.
Liam says he's got it. Check your direct messages.
God.
And Liam's right.
Of course he's right.
I'm going to go with Premier League medals. Anderson?
I went with Nani. I almost want to throw Peter Cech in now, but
Anderson? I want to say Anderson.
I'm going Nani.
Anderson.
All right, well, you're both wrong.
Of course.
What is it?
He's from Norway.
Oh. Yeah. Do you mind if
And
I?
his name is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Solskjaer.
Oh my God.
Solskjaer.
And
Former coach of, who was it that he just coached? Cardiff?
Cardiff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cardiff. Solskjaer, yeah. How many does he have?
I'm not sure, Rob.
Let me check. He has 6.
Well, that's the most.
6. 97, 99, 2000, 2001, 2003, 2007.
Manchester United's glory years.
And that's
well behind them now.
And that's what I was trying to pick a United player. I mean, I know Thierry Henry was Arsenal, but I was trying to pick a United player because I figured that's where it was going to come from.
Right.
Right.
Well, he stumped us this time.
And when I ask that question in 10 years, you'll be able to think of a Manchester City player because that's where the answer will be.
We'll say Kun Aguero, right?
Say Kun Aguero?
No, because he's not here. Oh, yeah, I guess they are. Yeah.
No,
that's South America.
No,
so
South America. No, we'd have to go with David Silva.
That's
Yeah, that would work.
Or
he's got 2 now, I guess, Silva. So yeah, that'll work.
He's working on it.
Vincent Kompany.
Vincent Kompany's be another one, yeah.
He needs to have a lot better year this year, though.
That's true.
Company.
That is true.
He won't be long for Man City, I don't think.
All right, boys. So now that we've cleaned up the trash, let's hit the closing music and send this one out.
All right.
Thanks to everyone for listening.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. So for episode 80 of Low Limit Football, our special thanks to Kristian Heneage, to James Hart, to Leander Schaerlaeckens, and to Andres Cordero for joining us. Next week, we will have the aforementioned Stephen Caldwell joining us formerly from Toronto FC. We'll talk to him about his retirement. We're going to talk to Sam Kelly about South American football as well. And there is potential for one more big guest. We also have Rob on location in Paraguay, so we'll definitely have to grill him about that. So for episode 80 of Low Limit Football, I am Joe Usello.
And I'm Roberto Rojas.
And I'm Mike Orr.
Thank you. Thanks again to everyone for joining us, and good night.
Thanks for listening.